Good evening, everybody. So welcome to our first advisory board meeting of the year. So I hope everybody had a good new year and welcome back. We got a lot to do, but let's go ahead and call for a vote to open the meeting. I have a
Second.
second. All right, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, very good. All right, shall we do a pledge? Allegiance?
Sure.
All right, cool. Let's do it. You all stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, I hope everyone's well, and thank you for being here tonight. So tonight, over the last several weeks, we will review the town's submitted 2026 budget. As previously discussed, just wanted to advise the board on a few things to remember as we go forward. The first one is that our job as an advisory board is it's not to say yes and it's not to say no. It is our job to ask why or why not, and then to make a recommendation to the town, to the citizens of the town, whether the amount requested is sufficient, too much, or not enough. We do not want to be a rubber stamp. That is very important. So please make sure that you understand each item in sufficient detail so as to be able to explain to your fellow board members as well as town meeting. If you think something could be done better, then let's dig into it and present it to the board. We are an oversight board, and providing critical thinking and evaluation of the budget as prepared by the town administrator is our job. The second thing that I would say that we need to keep in mind is that simply saying that it's a 3% increase, so it's fine, is not our mission. If that's the case, then we don't need to be here, and quite frankly, we could just stay home. Our job is to look deeper and to locate future areas of risk for the town, to identify efficiencies that should be explored to reduce cost and be better stewards, and question the expenses associated with town operations. For example, just because something has always been done that way doesn't mean that it should be done that way. And it's our job to ask why, so that way we can understand that and the town can understand that. We have the ability to recommend approval, and we should take that responsibility very seriously. And the third point that I'd make is just, as we all know, it's a lot of work, right? We only have, a few months before town meeting, and then we're mostly done until the fall. So I want to, again, thank everybody for their time, their dedication, and hard work to support the town and to be part of the solution in ensuring that our systems and checks and balances is effective and works here in the town of Marshfield. We're each performing a very important role, and we should be proud of our contribution to our community and to our democratic town government. The advisory board plays a fundamental role in oversight for the town's financial resources. And so please give it the same level of scrutiny and thoughtfulness that you give your own checkbook. So let's talk about logistics. Our next meeting, we're meeting obviously tonight. Our agenda is to review the school's budget, which makes up roughly 50% of the town budget. Our next meeting is going to be Monday, March 3rd. And at the meeting, we're going to be meeting with the town fire chief and police chief to discuss another significant line item in our budget, which is town safety. One of the things I wanted to ask is if we believe that I think we could fit in time that night to also talk with some representatives from DPW. If we could reach out to them and see if there's anybody that's available to come by and discuss the budget with us. I realize that we've been doing some work on the side, but I think it would be a good idea to have some discussion, so that way the whole board can hear some of that.
I've got a call into Sean already.
Okay, great.
I'll just
Again, if they can, they can. If they can't, they can't. Let's do what we can. And I'd also say Monday too will probably be a little bit of a late meeting because we got a lot of work to do. So please be prepared for that. Our next meeting after that's not planned until March 17th, but my understanding is that we're required to make recommendations on the budget in particular by March 15th. Is that correct, Michael? I got that right?
That is correct.
March 15th?
Printing the
printing the warrant.
Okay. So in the meantime, we need to vote on each item, each department. And so I'm thinking that we probably need to discuss getting something on the calendar for the week of the 10th, March 10th, and I just wanted to check calendars real quick and see if that works for everybody.
Not in person, but I can definitely.
You can do Zoom? Okay, got it. And
That
you,
should be fine.
you could, okay.
Are we giving up one of the other days?
What's that?
17th, are we switching the 17th?
No, we'll still do, we could probably nix the 17th because we have the joint meeting is the week of the 20, it is the 25th, you're right, okay. So yeah, we could definitely take the 17th off of the books.
I'm not available at the time.
You're not available that week?
Just that day.
Okay, just that day.
Well, actually, the 10th and 11th.
10th and 11th, both the 12th, Wednesday, 12th.
So 12th or 13th.
12th or 13th.
So you can do Wednesday or Thursday. You're available, but you're available via Zoom. Okay.
And Jan,
You're available via Zoom. Okay.
that's all right, isn't it right, that provides it, that we still get a quorum if it's a Zoom, right?
Yeah. So Paul, Zoom, Jan.
11th, I could probably do Zoom if that works.
No, that's fine. We can do it, and we'll do the
The 12th?
12th works? Does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay. All right, Sherry in person. Michael, can you be available on the 12th? The meeting of the 12th?
Yes.
You and Sean, can you be available as well? That's a Wednesday.
Yes.
Works? All right,
Yes.
great, perfect. Okay, thank you. All right. So at that meeting, we'll definitely be going through, in a little bit of a marathon session, all of the rest that we haven't already gotten through by that time. Okay.
So the 3rd at 6:30 and the 12th.
The 3rd at 6:30 here in Chambers, and we're all going to be present. You'll be there for that? Be there for that?
Yeah, will we have these detailed budgets? Do we have
So
to require?
these were just produced today. These are backup for some questions that I already had for schools, so,
Okay.
yeah.
We can request that.
Yes, yes.
So we're getting rid of the 17th.
Police and fire.
Police and fire on Monday, yep,
Yeah. Who's handling police and fire?
yeah. What's that?
We're not doing a meeting on the 17th.
No meeting on the 17th. So we'll nix the meeting on the 17th, take that off the books. We'll meet again after the 3rd, which is this upcoming Monday. We'll meet again on the 12th. And that'll be our meeting where we definitively get through all of the budget items that we haven't got through already.
So we have
On the
two
12th.
more meetings coming then.
Correct. Yep. And then the remainder of the meetings, beginning after, or basically so we got the joint meeting on the 25th, and then we have a meeting on the 31st of April, and I think there was a couple other ones.
Yeah.
The remaining meetings in April will be to discuss the warrants. So the warrants will be available on March 18th, correct? Or,
So the week before the joint meeting,
So the 18th.
okay,
for the 25th, so the 18th.
got it. Okay, so we'll have an opportunity to review that, so that way on the joint meeting, we have an opportunity to ask questions and whatnot.
And can they be amended after, is that part of the process?
No,
No.
no. Our job will be to simply ask all the questions necessary to determine whether or not we want to recommend
I see.
the town proceeds. Okay. All right.
17th is off, right?
17th's off, that's right. Okay. All right, any other logistical items that we should talk about, process-wise? Okay, great. So we'll move on. So next on the agenda is to meet with our friends from the Marshfield School District. So Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Miller, I appreciate you attending. So schools represent half of our total town budget. They obviously provide a critical service to our town, and the performance of our schools directly impact everything from the spirit of our town to property values, and more important than anything, the future of our youth. So I appreciate you gentlemen coming here tonight to meet with us directly regarding the proposed school budget. I realize that in the past, the advisory board would have had most of these meetings off-site, but given the size and scope of this budget, not that the size and scope is really much different than prior budgets, but just given that it literally makes up around half of our total town's budget, it's my belief that it's not only right but necessary to publicly discuss these budgets in an open, transparent manner, as I know that the school committee already does. And so I appreciate you being here today to meet with the advisory board. So I have a series of questions and would like to review these with you and get your input and feedback. And I've had an opportunity to review some of this, as I know Jan has, but I would ask my fellow board members to jump in and ask follow-on questions. And, just jump in. You don't have to ask me for permission. I want this to be very much a discussion. I'm sure Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Miller would appreciate that as well. Let's keep it on a discussion basis. I will say, on a personal note, both of my children are in Marshfield Public Schools. It is one of the reasons we chose Marshfield out of other communities to live in, and I couldn't be happier and prouder of the work that you and your teams are doing across the town. I mean that with all sincerity. I was just talking to one of my son's teachers today, and the amount of help and support that they provide him, the amount of attention that they provide each of their pupils is pretty amazing, and it's tremendous, and I appreciate that. I know that everybody who has a child that's either gone through the public school system here or is going through appreciates it well, so thank you again. So I thought it would be good to start off with some operational questions too. We're talking budgets, so it makes sense to talk about what the drivers of the budget are before we even get into dollars and cents, and just understanding what actually makes this budget up, right? Where have we come from? Where are we going? That sort of thing. And so the first thing that I wanted to do is just understand a little bit about the composition of the school system. And I appreciate some of the information that you've provided, but maybe, and obviously I know that folks watching and whatnot won't have the benefit of seeing all of this here, and a lot of us are seeing it for the first time. But maybe you could walk us through, just very generally, very briefly, how many pupils do we have in the Marshfield public school system today? How does that compare versus 5, 10, 15 years ago? And how does that break down between our, elementary, middle school, and high school?
I'll start off. In your packet, there's pages 4, 5, and 6 show our enrollment. It's kind of a little bit of a wonky spreadsheet, but it shows us 2014, 2019, and our current enrollment for 2024, 2025. So if you take a look over what's really driven this on, so page 4, we're going back approximately 10 years, and you can see down in the right-hand corner, FY15 total 4,213. So 10 years ago, we had a little over 4,200 students, and it's no secret that enrollment has been declining. It's been steadily declining a small amount each year with each incoming kindergarten class and each graduating senior class. Typically, if you take a look at 2014, you can look down in that very last line item and roll out into the high school grades, and you can see those class sizes in the high school at that time were 354, 363, 346, 329. Right now, if you quickly take a look at page 6, you can see you can see what has changed over those 10 years. That bottom line total, if you look at the high school, it's 308, 248, 275, oops, sorry, I missed a line. 248, 275, 296, 324. Our outgoing seniors this year is our last fairly large class. Our incoming freshmen next year are currently over 300, but after that, there's no other grades over 300. So we've experienced that steady decline. And this, if you can dig a little bit deeper into this document, a number of these questions that Rick asked kind of are answered in these 3 documents over the period of time. So you can see how the breakdown is K to 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But just overall, you can see that this year in October, we had 3,577 students. So over that 10-year period, we dropped approximately a little over 600 students. So 600 students over 13 grades. That's where you get that roughly 320 per grade. And if you look down this year, our incoming kindergarten class, 278. So eventually it may dip back up. It may level out in the 275 range. But that's what we're experiencing, and the whole breakdown is here. Do you have anything to add?
No, I do. It's, first of all, I want to thank all of you for the work you do too. Thank you for your kind comments, Mr. Smith, about the schools. We have children in the schools too, so it's, we're totally invested in it. Appreciate your work. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. What are the drivers behind the enrollment dropping? It's hard to tell. I mean, we can theorize maybe people are having fewer kids with economic times, with the economic times, but it's clearly been a drop over the last 10 years. Some NESDEC projections show that it does level out a bit, but I'm not even sure how NESDEC does that. Looking back, looking ahead 20 years. But we definitely have some dropping enrollments.
And the key to this is, and I know it's a little bit in some of these questions later, but when you look at it black and white and go 4,200 to 3,600, that's a dramatic increase over a 10-year period. But when we have 50 less students, it doesn't necessarily mean, especially at the secondary level, and we'll talk a little bit about that more. So in the 2010s, we saw the beginning of the enrollment decline. It started at the elementary schools, K to 5, and we've adjusted accordingly with our classrooms. You can take a look at the number of classrooms that are on this sheet. You can look at 25 and see where we're at, and you can compare it to the same school back in 2014, and you can see that there's a drop. I don't have the number here, but we'll get into it a little bit more on a couple of these other questions.
And some of the other drivers, of course, are even though our numbers have dropped, our needs haven't necessarily dropped. For instance, our special education programming and special education teachers have risen because of the needs. Mental health, our mental health providers have increased because of the needs. And then there are mandates from the state that have increased our pricings regarding curriculum that we're required to put into place. So the needs have risen, but yet even though some of the numbers have dropped. So we can talk about that as we go, because those are some of the drivers of the budget too.
Well, that's one of the things that I want to understand, right, is that it's about a 15% decrease in the last 10 years. If you go back further than that, what does it look like in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, going back.
15,
I think
20 years.
I did,
I
we
see.
went, we could pull the data from the state from
Okay.
Yeah.
2008 forward.
Yeah.
2008 was 4,718.
Yeah, so we had about another 500 drop from 2008 to 2014.
We seemed to peak in numbers in 2010.
So it's been about a 25% drop over the last
Yep.
15 years, 15-ish,
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
maybe 17 years. Okay, so, and one of the things you just mentioned, Mr. Sullivan, is that while the enrollment's been declining, there's been an increase in needs. Can you talk us through a little bit about what those needs are?
Well, one of the drivers, obviously, I mentioned, not that it's the biggest driver, but special education, ensures that all students ages 3 to 22 with disabilities receive the proper, appropriate education.
And that's ages what, I'm sorry?
3 to 22.
And when did that come about? That's a state law, correct?
Yeah, that's IDEA, which, I would say that was 1995. But again, our the amount of the actual needs of our students have risen throughout the years, and our staffing has risen because of those needs. And part of the reason is we're trying to keep our students in district. So we're trying to keep, because the out of district costs are exorbitant, and we try to keep students in district for a bunch of reasons. The cost, but also because we want to provide that in Marshfield.
Yep.
So that's one of the drivers. And then, of course, I mentioned curriculum writing and program adoptions, which is something that has risen throughout the years. And then we've invested in some research-based options, such as instructional coaching, digital learning. Our digital learning needs have risen. And we've really tried to create multi-tiered systems of support, which involve screenings, and our grant funding has decreased throughout the years too. So there's a lot of budget sort of stressors that are causing us to spend more, even though our numbers have dropped.
And just out of curiosity, that you said the grant funding's dropped.
Mainly Title I.
Okay.
Yep.
How much has that dropped? What kind of impact has that had?
Significantly. I don't have the numbers over the years, but it's.
These were grants spent on educational programs, not on buildings,
No,
facilities,
these are
nothing like that?
directly to educational programming. Title I funds students of need, academic need.
Okay.
I mean, at one time,
Based on financial
it was $300,000, $400,000 range, and now it's $100,000
Correct.
range, somewhere
Yep.
in that range, so.
Just to, so I'm a little clear on needs, is this needs in expanded curriculum or needs in quantity of pupils, or both?
Well, with the special education, it's been needs for individual student needs, and that's risen. But our pupils across the district have decreased, but we have a need in quality curriculum that costs a lot more now than it did in those days.
And the needs for that curriculum, the curriculum-based services, you said curriculum drivers and program options. Those are things above and beyond what we're required to do by the state, or those are part of, or those are state requirements that have been put onto us, or how does that?
Yeah, they're high-quality instructional materials that DESE requires us to purchase, and sometimes those become sort of unfunded mandates that cost a lot more now. It used to be, you were just buying textbooks, now you're buying subscriptions. It's very much,
And we're required to use the state.
We're required to use what the state deems as high-quality materials, and they're typically a list of appropriate materials that they feel hit the high-quality measure,
Yeah.
and they're very costly. Yeah, we're finding that has been a big driver.
Are there a lot of companies that provide those types of services, or is it pretty limited where you're?
It's somewhat limited, which makes you scratch your head sometimes. But yeah, that's been a problem for us as we're trying to keep our our adoptions down, our cost adoptions down. And we're trying to get in a curriculum cycle where our budget is tied into and our review of curricula. But the problem is, as we realize that we continue to spend money year after year on the curriculum as opposed to what used to be a one-time purchase that would last, 5, 10 years.
Well, it used to be just textbooks, right? Now there's software
It's
packages.
really online subscriptions,
Yeah.
and software packages.
We competitively purchase that, but I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
But to do that, we're still limited in what we can actually go after, so you can't just, yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
all right.
And then just getting back to the staffing real quick, so over that time period, at the zenith of our elementary classrooms, we had 102.5. Now we have 81. So that means 21 plus less classrooms, less teachers. But what Dr. Sullivan was referring to is social workers, behavioral specialists, adjustment counselors, psychologists, increase in nursing, increase in therapists, tutors. It's a lot. Back when we were in school, very little of that existed.
Yeah.
It was the teacher, it was the student, it was pen and paper, or pencil and paper. But now there's so many
Yeah.
things that the district needs to provide, and it just continues
Well,
to build.
Just one example, back in, the years that we were citing 10 years ago, we could have one nurse for 1,000 kids, and now you have to have, the guidelines are one nurse for 450 kids. So that has changed,
This is state dictated.
Yes, that's a mandate, and that particular one is, I think, a good one, but it does cause us to hire more staff. So
Yeah, that's the last page in the packet, is what provided Rick previously. That's straight from the DSE. Educator staff, it doesn't include custodians, our CAF, food service, van drivers, athletic coaches, or substitutes, but it's everybody else. And you can see that number is pretty much the same over that time period, despite our enrollment dropping. And the number of teachers there is the same as well. And that's the increase in our special education teachers, our English language learner teachers. We're always looking at our class sizes and looking at, we had a real focus on elementary. As the elementary declined, we have 21 less classrooms. Now we're focused on the secondary level, and just over the last, because that drop has now reached secondary level, as you can tell from those enrollment sheets 2, 3, and 4. We're now on an annual basis looking at our secondary class sizes. It's really difficult at the middle school. Dr. Sullivan was a former middle school principal, and there's a cluster model there. He can speak to it much better than I can, but it's really difficult to eliminate positions at the middle school. But we have. Last year we dropped
did.
3 positions.
And we've invested in
vacancies.
a middle school model, which is really socially constructed. The social growth of middle school students, anyone who's had a middle school student realizes that their social growth in many ways trumps their academic growth. And so what research has showed is that if you create environments that break bigger schools into smaller schools, and you can have a team approach around a student socially, emotionally, so that you're really taking care of them socially and academically, that scores rise and the kids do better on social emotional measures as well. So yeah, that's an investment. Once you break that model, you move to more what would be the traditional junior high model, which is basically just like the high school where you're departmentalized and you're not taking care of the student at that age group, that very important age group where they're really coming to realize who they are. And back to the staffing, we talked a little bit about ELs, but English language learners. Our English language learners 10 years ago, we had 14 English language learners. We now have 128. So you can see how this.
129.
129 as of today,
one, two,
that's
three.
right. So in 2014.
And just for clarification, English language learner, can you define what that, I think I know what that means, but could you just?
Yeah, an
make sure
English
we're clear on
language
that?
learner is an individual who does not speak English as their native first language, and usually has people at home who speak, who do not speak English, who speak another language. And they're defined as students who require services based on their level, their foundational level of English aptitude, not aptitude, but where they are learning English at this point. We also have a significant number of MLs, which are multi-language learners who have multiple languages that are at home as well, but are, just to give you an idea, 14 to 128, when we had 14, we only had 0.6 of a full-time educator working with those students. We now have 6.2 full-time ELs, and we have a number of interpreters too. We have 3 ESPs who are interpreters and help with those
You
students.
said what was the number before, you said it's 4?
It was
now?
14, sorry, the number of staff.
Yeah,
So we had, in 2014, we had 14 ELs,
yep.
and we had 0.6 full-time employees,
No, it's 0.6 on there.
right?
I had 0.8.
You have 0.8?
Could be, but this is 15, so it might have.
Well, you, and then I have,
It's been a.
it's a study. We had 48 in 2018 ELs with 3 full-time employees, and now we have 128 with 6.2 full-time employees, and we have 3 interpreters.
And a 0.8 director.
And a .8 director. And the numbers are growing. So our largest group of ELs in the district are our kindergartners. I believe we have around 26 of them. So.
How do you utilize interpreter across all the different schools and environments?
Well, we share them throughout the.
It's not like, it's not like an interpreter sits with
No.
a student.
And right now, we don't have, that's not the way it's designed, or the language acquisition is designed, but you do need interpreters to help. Right now, we have, we would like a model where we were able to have our ELs go to the school where they live, where they're districted to live, but we're not quite there yet. So we actually have 3 of our schools. We have Martinson.
3 elementaries.
3 elementaries, sorry, Martinson, Daniel Webster, and we have some at South River. So that's also a thought, increasing that. It's very difficult it's hard enough for a student who moves here from a different country who doesn't speak English to access students who are in their neighborhood, and then to have to move them off to another elementary school across town is just not something we'd like to do. But right now, financially, we're kind of set in that form.
And so you said 26 kids are in kindergarten,
Yeah, that's a little bit of an estimate. It's around 26.
Do you know what the breakdown is for high school, middle, and I'm just curious, like
Yeah,
elementary?
We just had a great presentation by Kate Malo, who was our director yesterday, and
Let me see if I
I
can
had it
find
up.
that.
You know what, I don't have it up here, but, give me one moment and I will pull it
Like
up.
even just curious.
Because, we should actually put that presentation online.
Yeah, it was very
It's
informative.
really,
Do you have that?
I have it right here.
Okay.
Yep. Because this is here and it's now, and it's in my world, it's a $700,000 budget increase
Yeah.
from 6 or 7 years ago.
But these are all examples of why the numbers, if you look at our numbers of pupils dropping and you look at the number of staff stabilizing, I'm just trying to give you an idea of some of the drivers to that.
Is that
Enrollment-
staff to English language learners ratio also another state dictated?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yeah, it is.
Sounds like the state, and again, forgive me for the rookie questions, but it sounds like the state has a nice big handbook and says, do this, do that, and.
Yeah.
And the,
It's sort of
and
unfunded
Unfunded.
mandates.
it's,
Yeah.
they'll
We-
say
we've
it's
never
not,
heard that
they'll say
term.
it's not unfunded because it is part of the Chapter 70 educational
Correct.
formula,
Yep.
funding formula, but it is minute. So across, I just looked at this today, our whole foundation budget it allocates 278,000 for ELs.
Yeah.
But that isn't the full amount that we receive. It goes through a whole big formula, and in the end, probably, when we get our Chapter 70 funding that goes to the general fund of the town, it probably represents a minute portion of that. So
Do you have that breakdown?
breakdown of 23 kindergartners, 20 first graders. At the middle school, 13. At the high school, 24.
Wow. So the.
So then the elementaries,
But that 23 in that one grade is I think,
Huge.
20 in first grade,
remarkable
23 in
because it's
kindergarten.
also
So
our
it's just
youngest
going to
students. It just-
continue to grow.
it
You
makes
got
you,
them,
it
yeah.
makes you wonder, if that number will.
And
grow.
again, I mean, so that's, oh yeah, right, and yeah, so 44 at Martinson, 37 at Daniel Webster, 6 at South River, and 3 Governor Winslow. But
Right,
there's
that's
still-
true.
Okay, and the budget impact from that you're saying is close to, yeah, I was doing the same math, it's about 700K.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, going back to, we really started to grow because FY15, we only had the part-time teacher director. She was amazing. She did so much work. We got a lot more than that from her. But she retired, and you had an 18, we had 3. So somewhere between 16, 17 is when we started to grow.
Okay.
And it's just continually grow. I had 52 students in school year 20. And we still only had the 3 FTE.
Yeah.
And now we have 6.2 teachers and 3 ESPs along with the director. So if you track back to either 16 or 17 to now, so in a 7 or 8 year time period, that's a $700,000 delta on our
But that 700,000 is theoretically offset by a reduction in costs from the attrition that.
That's how we managed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I manage.
What's the ESP again?
What are ESPs? They're support personnel for.
Educational support
Yeah,
personnel.
educational support personnel, thanks. Professionals, educational
Professionals.
support professionals. And they are, most of our educational support professionals are because of individual education program needs, IEP needs. But we do have other categories. For instance, we've invested, and this has also changed over the years, we've invested in kindergarten ESPs because we realize how important it is for, a class of 17, 18 kindergartners to have 2 adults watching them. They're very young, and that's a need. So we wanted to provide that high quality service for them. And then for our ELs, they also receive some support via the ESPs as well.
What's our average spending in the town of Marshfield per pupil, when you look at it per pupil?
Yeah, we do, we know that.
So that is, so we
You
can
know
look at, in the
18,233.
in the packet, pages 7 through 10 lists every district in the state over 1,000 students.
Okay.
And you have to go page 1, page 2, page 3. We're on page 4. It just so happened we're right at the top of page 4, but we rank 132nd at 18,436 per pupil. 132nd out of 156 districts across the state with greater than 1,000 students. And then if you flip to page 11 in the packet, we pulled the per pupils. This is from FY23 because the state cranks out this data. You can see where we rank on the South Shore.
Third to
We're
last.
just, Whitman, Hanson, and Hanover are just slightly below us. But you can see across the board there where we rank with our neighbors. And historically, the South Shore has been low because you can see the state total. The state total, only 3 districts on the South Shore exceed the state total. So if you flip back to 7, 8, 9, 10, you can see across the state where the spending is much more per pupil. You know, our friends in Cambridge and Cambridge, 39,000 per student. And then I bolded all those South Shore schools. There's none on that first page. Then you get to Cohasset, Dr. Sullivan's former districts at the top of that second page. Silver Lake and Plymouth are the only other two schools that exceed the state total. And then bold, you have the rest of the bolds there. We've actually, so it is interesting because 6 or 7 years ago, we would have been down about 150th out of the 156. But with our enrollment declining a little bit, so back when we had 4,500 students, we worked with the same administration. You know, we were the
so
largest.
lean.
We were by far the largest district, and still are to some extent, that works with 4 administrators.
That's another reason.
And that's a reason why we're down here.
Yeah, it's a reason, and the numbers are misleading because we were literally the lowest, or right about the lowest in per pupil expenditure. Even with our number of pupils dropping, we're still fairly low for the area and very low for the state.
So the median on this, so it looks like we're well below the median from a state perspective, and we're also well below the median from a regional perspective in terms
Yeah.
of South Shore.
And that hasn't shifted all
Yeah.
that much, even
And
though.
it's,
yeah.
I mean, it's partially due, again, 7 or 8, 10 years ago, when I was when I would pull this data and we'd be, this has actually changed a lot over those 10 years, because I remember, it might have been this very meeting 10 years ago, where I had a snapshot of the bottom 10 districts. It was Marshfield, it was 9 other towns that Marshfield would not want to be associated with. And it was striking. And now, as our enrollments declined, the overhead fixed cost, obviously, per pupil rise a little bit. And that's what's happened here.
Sure.
Because we were a big town, not a city, still operating like a small town. And we still are, to a certain extent. Because but we've gotten closer enrollment wise with, I mean, I think Hingham were enrollment rise, we were much higher than Hingham, and now we're about the same.
Hingham's budget is fairly.
They're larger than us. Well, that's fair. But that's what's changed over time. So, I mean, these numbers are really, it's, it derives back to administration, overhead, fixed costs, along with classroom instruction and what your overall class sizes are. So, and even at that, I know you asked about classroom teacher ratio.
Did we
and
answer the first?
Well, yeah, so the next question, right, is, so on a per pupil, so enrollment's dropped significantly by about 25% over the last 15 to 20 years. As far as a per pupil expenditure, we're definitely on the low end for the state.
Still on the
Like,
low end.
way on the low end. I'd say we're on the bottom 24%, right? Or bottom quarter, right?
Yep.
25%. But then, if we look at the other thing that I'm curious about is what is the metric that we should be looking at in terms of how Marshfield pupils compare against others in the state? So, when we compare different towns and spending and everything else,
The
the
state
cost
does
of a
that
home
first.
here is different, and
Yep.
how do we compare Marshfield students to other students academically?
So the state has arranged it in what's called the DART districts.
What's it called, a DART?
DART.
DART, D-A-R-T?
D-A-R-T. I don't believe it might just be your target districts. It could be an acronym.
District assistance something.
Okay.
So-
Anyway, I always looked at it as just thinking of a target. These are your districts that you're compared to.
Sure.
There's an
And they
example
list
on
it. It's on page 13.
Okay.
And so what we've typically done from an achievement standpoint is we've looked at towns around us, and it's not always accurate for Marshfield, because the demographics can be different. But yet, we do want to have some comparables around us as well. But we now look at, when we do our MCAS data reviews, our AP data review, and SAT and other things, we look at our DART districts as well. So we kind of do a mix. So, but you can see on page 13, you can kind of get a sense for where the state puts us in some of those metrics.
And why, when I look at page 13, it's the one you refer to, right?
I think it was 13.
13.
Yeah.
I said that without looking at the page.
So why does it compare it to these towns? So
They look
Chelmsford,
at, so
East,
those first,
Grafton.
under 2024 enrollment,
Yeah,
they look at districts with sort of a similar enrollment,
So it's
but
got-
really demographically, low income, what's SWD?
Student support.
Sort of with disabilities.
Students with disabilities.
And then ELL. So it's looking at the factors that we've been talking about. Yeah, we didn't talk about, we didn't mention low income, but that's the Title I component.
and what's SWD? Sorry,
Students with disabilities,
with disabilities. Okay, and ELL is the
English
English.
language
Yeah,
learners.
okay.
And you can see, like,
So
we're,
it's enrollment, income.
So these are the towns you're saying: Chelmsford, Easton, Franklin, Grafton, Mansfield, North Andover, Pembroke, Tewksbury, and Wakefield are the most that similar in terms of
According to the state.
low income percentage, according to the state, low income percentage with disabilities and percentage of English language learners.
And they also look at enrollment too. So they're not going to put a really
Okay.
small, there's a range there.
Yeah.
But it's within their acceptable range of comparable districts.
Okay, so about almost 19% of our students are considered low income. So that means that they come from families that meet a low income threshold as far as state
yes, yeah.
measurements are concerned. Students with disabilities are also about 20%, so just a hair higher than that.
Yeah.
And then students with that are English language learners, meaning it's not their primary language at home, are almost 3%.
And that percentage has actually gone up.
I find it fascinating that Mansfield and Marshfield are so, this is similar in names.
It's been that
They're
way
similar in colors, and they're.
I've been doing this almost 20 years, and Mansfield and Marshfield are like tied like this.
They really are both tremendous football team. You can go right down the line.
I moved from Mansfield.
Briefly
So-
on the disabilities, how wide of a range is that? 20% seems to be awful high. Is that
Yeah, it's,
cognitive disabilities, physical disability, every disability that you can come up with?
It's every disability that's diagnosed and that receives some service.
So every one of these, would it be safe to say that every one of these, or not, maybe not everyone, because that's too blanket, but the majority of that 20% receives some sort of services from town, or is that not accurate?
I think it's accurate to say the majority, yeah.
Are they all IEPs
I
or
think it's IEPs.
IEPs?
And it could be
504s?
504s, I'm not.
It could be a 504.
I mean, sure.
It's a IEP it's an individual
Education program.
plan
Yep.
program, and it's, so if you have a disability, they put together a program for you, and that it's requirements to
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah, you have to qualify, typically, a 504 is accommodations within the classroom. The IEP goes beyond that.
And this is,
The-
in what we provide to these students and the number of faculty that we provide is directly correlated with the state law that went into effect in 95?
That's correct.
Okay.
Federal law.
Oh, that's federal.
The
law.
IDA is federal law.
Federal law, okay, got it. Says the IDEA?
IDEA.
What, I mean,
Individual with disabilities educational.
you probably don't have this answer off the top of your head, but just ballpark, any idea what it was 10, 15 years ago for Marshfield?
Definitely increased. I think.
I mean, is it increased by a couple percentage
Yeah,
points, or is it
yeah.
like double?
Yeah, I do.
You already know?
Former,
Wow.
former,
I
former
would
special education
say
bookkeeper.
It
when
might have been
Alright.
around 17.
17, yeah. 15,
17,
16,
because they-
17.
Yeah, because I think, isn't like 20% is like where they,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
So
think
it was
that
lower.
is
We were
the
lower.
So in
highest.
2000, I have it right here.
Oh.
In 2014, we had, I'm just going to go by these numbers. They might be a little different than the ones we have, but we have 4,400 611 students, 667 total students with disabilities, which is 15%.
15?
And then right now, we have 3,691 students. I'm sorry if this is a little off what we had there. 745 students with disabilities, and that's 20.18%.
So that speaks volumes there, because
22%, right?
20.18%.
Yep, yep, okay.
so despite that drop in enrollment, we have more students on IEPs. It's a function, I mean.
Yeah, and our
it's-
special education teachers have gone from 49 in 2013 to 68.2 in 2024 as a
There's your
result
20,
of.
there's your 20
Say that again,
less
how many?
elementary.
So it was 2013, we had 49
Sped teachers?
special education teachers, and in 2024, we have 68.2.
We could probably have a whole discussion all night about why that is and what causes that, because I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't just a Marshfield or a Massachusetts thing. This is all across the country, and
Yeah, and there's a multitude of other support staff too, BCBAs, multisensory reading tutors, special education.
for my own edification, before 1995, districts were not required to provide services, or was it just at the discretion of the district if they wanted to or not, or whether they had the
I
money?
think back when I was in school, I mean, if you go back and take a look at your yearbook and look at the
Oh, no,
staff,
yeah, I'm with you. It was a very, very small,
there's like two special education teachers
right. yeah.
But wasn't
for the
that
whole
about
high school.
the
What's that?
right, wasn't that about the right to testing and to,
Yeah.
wasn't that 1995 was the
Well,
right?
things have changed so much. I mean,
Yeah.
we still have, and there's, it's one of your questions about out-of-district students.
Yep.
And, we still send approximately 50 to 60 students to out-of-district special education schools, collaboratives, private schools.
50 to 60 today, currently.
50 to 60 today, and that,
And how come,
that's-
sorry to interrupt you, how can we send them out of Marshfield?
So
if we're not able to provide services, so the
Adequate.
example I always give is Perkins School for the Blind. I know the name's changed.
It's unique.
But we
yeah,
cannot educate them.
And we're required to provide,
We are. It's like, it's unique learning, behavioral, medical
yep, understood.
needs.
And it comes at a big expense.
And it's made, all of that is made in the IEP process, so through the team. A team creates that process. But if you look at the numbers of out-of-district students, in 2018, we had 65. In 2024, we have 45. So the building up of our programming,
That's where we keep them. So instead
that's a
of,
money saver. I mean, it's
Instead of
good for the
paying-
kids, too.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the big thing, by the way.
and these
But
aren't our
without-
really
without-
high, the really, really high need students, that wheelchair, air tube, like those
The
students.
hospitalized students.
Hospitalized, they go to specialized schools. And then we have collaboratives, but we've brought a number of students back from paying a collaborative $80,000 a year. We create our own program, if we had been, I mean, this is just all made up numbers, but 10 collaborative students going to a local collaborative at $80,000, $800,000. We can create a program, a couple teachers, a couple ESPs, maybe a social worker and a therapist, and it costs us $400,000.
Yeah.
So I want to ask,
And we also
know-
have the ability to have other students from other districts
It's tuition
come-
in.
tuition into those.
okay, and then they pay.
And there's an obligation for maintenance of effort
Yeah.
that the state looks at us for, that we can't just drop services that we provide. We have to show a maintenance of effort in terms of the spending we have on our students with disabilities too.
Oh, go ahead.
Just page 16 is
Yep.
kind of, because you had asked about the, I think it was, it says private schools or something like that, because there is a private, those are all still special education schools.
Yep.
The one thing just to highlight on this, so the state does heavily reimburse us for highly need students, but there is a threshold, so, I think Ms. Costello knows all about this.
Yeah.
So if I always try to think up numbers. But we have students that are $400,000 annually.
Significantly involved.
And the state, we're responsible, I think the threshold now is up to about 60,000, roughly. So 60,000 is on Marshfield. And then, I should have made the numbers work. Say it's 360,000. So 60,000 is Marshfield. The next $300,000 is reimbursed by the state. Almost always at 75%. So if you do the math, that's another 75,000 on Marshfield. So it's costing. So if a student is going out of district for 360,000, it's costing Marshfield around 130,000. The state picks up the rest. We're reimbursed the next year for those expenditures, and that's what circuit breaker is. It's
Got it.
it's kind of like the
Yep,
quick
that's formula.
quick deal. But if you look at this, I just want to point out here, FY25 out of district expense, about 5 lines down, 4.26 million. So those 50 to 60 students cost that much money. And those are students we do not have the ability to educate in our schools.
Right.
But you can see from a financial perspective, I mentioned
It's a heavy burden.
well, but it's also important for us to build up our programming to be able to.
It offsets, yeah, sure, right, yeah, it brings it in-house, which creates a lower cost. I have to ask a question, which I know somebody's gonna be like, I can't believe you asked that question, but
Sorry.
that's what I do. I like to
All
ask.
good.
We answer them all day.
All right, hold on, everybody,
Yeah,
just.
just grab on. Here's my, and I'm not implying anything by this, question, so please don't read into it. I'm a rookie trying to understand, like, the details. Since 1995, in 1995, there was a federal change in law that has resulted in a huge expansion, I would think, on a national level, right? Going down to every city, every town, every state across the country, that provides for services that, 20 years ago, like when you and I were in school, didn't exist, right? With that being said, one of the things I'm curious about is that what is the level of, and this is the part that, please don't roll your eyes, I'm just trying to understand, what is the level of quality control that goes into ensuring that we're not that we're not pushing too many people through a system? And again, I say that very delicately because I absolutely emphatically can't stress enough how much I believe that everybody requires the help that they need. But I'm just trying to understand,
Well,
because
yes.
you could see how in 1995, if a federal law came into
Yeah,
effect,
and you get all kinds of grants associated with
the
it.
grants, the private funding, and everything else. And so one of the things, of course, that I just naturally wonder as a pretty fiscally conservative guy is, obviously that means there's a lot of people that are getting help that should have been getting help in the first place, and thank God they finally are.
Yeah.
But how are we ensuring that there's a certain level of control, so we're not
Yeah.
pushing everything?
Well, there's.
You know what I'm
there's been-
saying?
There have been systems.
Does that sound terrible?
No, I mean, I understand your question, but I'm
Yeah,
not,
and so there are systems that we want to make sure that every student gets what that student.
Of course.
Needs,
Right.
and that they're able to even the playing field to have successful opportunity is really what this is all about. So we do have, and it's changed over the years, I'm not even sure what it was called before, response to intervention, but it was called response to intervention, and then lately it's been shifted to be called multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS. And what it does is it looks at the way we teach students. Tier 1 is all students receive education from the teacher, and you want to make sure that you're doing things universally that help all students. And then you, through data, can look at students who that first tier isn't meeting, and you can dip down a little deeper and do a tier 2, which is a little bit more of an intensive drive, which usually could be some push-in the classroom to help that student. There's a variety of things. And then tier 3 could be, maybe you're taking a student out, which are always looking for the most inclusive environment possible. But tier 3 could be a more intense intervention, like a pullout. And then potentially, if the student is still not succeeding in that and does have a disability, because there's always the ability to test a student outside of the multi-tiered system supports, that student would be eligible for special education support. So we're trying to be the least restrictive environment as possible. Keep students in the classroom and make sure that we have teaching techniques that help out all of the kids. And those tiers are timed and tracked. So we look at it as an intervention. And if I'm a student and I'm receiving an intervention, you time and you track it to see what kind of success you're having. And then possibly you don't need that anymore. You can pull off of that. Or sometimes students aren't succeeding and they need a more intensive intervention. But it's all trying to make sure students get what they need in the environment where they can best succeed.
Of course.
So that's been a really thoughtful process over the years.
Yep.
And we've invested a lot of time, a lot of money in that, in professional development, and it's well, hopefully paying up dividends.
And I'm probably going off the rails a little bit too here in my answer, but with that comes a lot of paperwork, a lot of, and that's where you see our special education teachers. They not only work as teachers, but they're also responsible
Yeah.
for a lot of paperwork.
They're doing
that's,
all that.
That's where that
All those, and there's
the
a new
increase-
IEP this year. And MTSS is not a special education initiative. It's a
But-
general education initiative, but it does have some impact on special education referral.
I guess that's the thing I was just trying to make sure I understand, but you've answered the question very well, and I appreciate that. It sounds like there's a pretty rigorous process.
There's a rigorous
and methodology that goes behind making sure that as
Do
students
it.
are moving
But then
along.
again, in special education, it's all about that team process too.
Of course,
looking
right.
at the disability, the success of the student, and there's a general education teacher on the team, and yes.
Isn't there a testing that is done initially as well? And if if the student is making adequate progress and it's found out through the testing, then they don't go on an IEP.
Well,
Right.
you want to make sure that not every student who has a disability would be on an IEP necessarily.
Got it.
It really has to do with what do we need to do to even the playing field so that they can have the opportunity to succeed just like everyone else.
So
Okay.
So the RT
And as-
won't necessarily put them on the IEP. The testing could be, but they'll track them and they'll make sure they're in that
Yeah,
team program.
and we're trying to help all students
Oh,
with the
yeah.
multi-tiered system, but it does help us ensure that we're doing everything we can to make students help students succeed
Succeed. Sure.
before we get to that other place. But sometimes that needs to happen separate from the MTSS.
And I mentioned the paperwork component of that though, but parents advocate for their children, and there's special education advocates that parents can go to get the services. Sometimes we do our best we can for every student, and sometimes parents disagree with it, and it becomes it's a real I don't want to say bureaucratic, but it becomes very it's not a battle, but like a lot of this is created, and that's time, that's people's time,
Well,
and that's
and the
that's
professional
staff.
development
It's-
that's required of special education teachers too is very specialized, and you can see it. There's a lot of nuance to it. They have to think about the behaviors of the students, how to deal with, in many cases, restraints if that has to happen. I mean, there's a lot of things that they have to attend to and have to be trained professionally to do, and that all costs money.
Can I ask a question about the funding? Is this grant here, this IDEA grant, that's the big SPED grant, right?
Yes,
All right, I just want to make a note that that grant has gone down significantly
yeah,
since
yeah.
hundreds.
It's around $1 million.
I was going to say, it used to be about $1 million. This looks like it's 738. Is that right?
What was it?
Yeah, 738. It used to be.
Sounds right. That was what we had talked about.
Middle grants.
So that's a big decrease.
It's just a little over $1 million right now.
Oh, it is? Okay.
$1,065,000.
Which grant was that?
The IDA.
The IDA.
On page 16.
And again, that's
it
only
says,
that's specifically
Yeah.
targeted.
It's that big grant, the big
Yeah,
grant.
yeah.
Okay.
Again, I appreciate that. So it's not, there's a lot of data and methodology process that goes into ensuring that there's a very defined path that we follow. Okay, good. Going back to the metrics and how we compare to other towns, so we talked a little bit about, how students demographically compare to other cities and towns, but how are we comparing, how are we faring on a ranking system? When you compare our students in Marshfield as far as MCAS results versus other towns,
That's,
can
Yeah,
you
you could, well, you,
help me translate some of what the,
well, I mean, there's room for improvement always, but we do have grades 3 through 10 that we see. I mean, if you're just talking,
well, they're here.
yeah, they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see MCAS there.
Yeah, so on that page,
13?
13,
Yep.
Yeah.
you can see the results of the 2024 MCAS results. And, it's, our ELA scores look relatively, grade 3 through 8.
We're in line. We're in line.
We're about in the, in the middle there. In
Middle
math,
up,
we're okay.
we're mid to the upper level of this group, of our dark group. On the, if you can look, you can see yourself.
and do you know how we compare to other South Shore towns as far as
Yeah,
our
I have
rankings?
that. So,
Will with
Cast
MCAS.
performance? Yeah.
yeah, I can pull.
Yeah. If you look at
It was
Ellen's,
in the- it was
if you look
in-
at Ellen's presentation,
It was linked here.
Right.
I don't know what happened. It was linked in the.
she
piece.
has it in there. Ellen.
It just disappeared. Yeah, Ellen had it, and I linked it on that question, but then I don't know if I probably deleted it by mistake. I'll find it. 1 second.
This is all on our website too. I can probably find it. Like a challenge. We're gonna get it.
You can, we can keep going. I don't want to.
I got it.
Oh,
You got it?
Yeah. All right. This is not. How is it compared to social towns? Athletics. Comparisons. There we go.
this is 3 slides before that.
Where is it?
No.
Right here. There we go.
Yeah.
So it's hard to read out where, so we looked at, the problem is it's not layered, so you can't see it. What we did when we looked at our neighboring districts and some of our DART districts. There's a little expanded look at DART districts, and we looked at Duxbury, Hingham, Plymouth, Situate, Marshfield, Easton, Foxborough, Franklin, and we actually put in Franklin and North Attleboro, which sometimes appear on our DART districts as well. And we were very comparable to, so I'll give you an example. ELA grade 3 to 8, Marshfield was at 52 of exceeding or meeting expectations, 52%, and Situate was at 58. Plymouth was at 44, Duxbury was at 64. In math, grade 10, Marshfield, ELA grade 10, Marshfield was at 76%, Situate was at 78, Duxbury was at 78, Easton was at 69, Foxborough was at 52. It's just grade 10. If I look at grade 10, just keep going with it. We're right there. Duxbury and Hingham have higher scores than us.
What was Marshfield, you said? I'm sorry?
What's that?
What was Marshfield?
What was Marshfield?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to read this. If you
No,
want
no, that's okay. That's all right.
look at it, but
Yep.
we're comparable. Grade 10 ELA, just achievement. Marshfield was 76% exceeding or meeting expectations in ELA, grade 10.
Okay.
Situate was 78. Marshfield was 76. Situate was 78. Plymouth was 51. Hingham was 86. Duxbury was 78. Easton was 69. Foxborough was 52. Franklin was 68, North Attleboro was 56. In math, grade 10, Marshfield has 63%, exceeding or meeting expectations. Duxbury was 76%, Hingham was 75, Plymouth was 35, Situate was 64, Easton was 69, Foxborough was 65, Franklin was 65, North Attleboro was 53. In science, grade 10, Marshfield was 59%, exceeding or meeting, and Situate was 69%, Plymouth was 29%, Hingham was 71, Duxbury was 71, Easton was 61, Foxborough was 68, Franklin was 73, North Attleboro was 62, so it's like science. And then our growth was right in the ballpark with all of them. So we're in the ballpark, competitive, not at the top, not at the bottom. That's where we are right now.
Math and science. That's right.
How many teachers do we employ in the town? Ballpark, you don't have to give me.
340.
300,
340? Okay.
340?
Yeah.
I was gonna say 300.
And our
You're
FTE,
right.
our FTE is
I remember that.
333.
326. From here, right? The teachers?
What's that? Oh, yeah, it'd be on the last, what's the
What
number?
number?
Last
Number
page.
333? That's FTE,
Oh,
So what is that, I don't know who the
326.
math person here is, but how does that, what is the student to classroom ratio then when we look at that?
So, go ahead, you.
So it's easy, it's easy K to 5. In K to 5, right now it's 19.66. That's direct, that's just teacher, the classroom teacher and the students. And just for comparative sake, that, 5 years ago it was 19.9, so it really hasn't changed very much.
Okay.
But in fiscal 15, it was 18.6. So it's, as we've decreased the number of classrooms, our class size has tweaked up a tiny bit. What we try to do as a district is K to 2. We try to keep in that 20 students per class.
That's pretty standard in districts around us too. That's
Typically 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We try not to go over 20, but sometimes it's not possible, 21, 22. And then for grades 3 to 5, we try to keep it in the 20 to 25 range. When you get to the secondary level, it's a lot trickier. Again, Dr. Sullivan talked about the cluster model at the middle school. So that the students are taking a variety of different classes. So
Yeah, there's typically about, 100 in a cluster.
roughly, yeah. Well, it depends on how many. It basically depends on how many students are in that grade.
Yeah, when I was there was roughly about 115 in a cluster, so,
Yeah.
about 100 in a cluster.
And then
There were
it's
300 in a grade. There's 3 clusters per grade.
But that translates back to the classroom at divided by
5 teachers.
5, so 20. In the 20.
In
so,
the 20 range.
So if you look, it's the class size, the teacher to student ratio, just classroom teacher ratio, that could be defined if you look at the number of students in a grade level, and then divide that by 5.
You can't.
That's how it kind of rolls back.
Yeah, it gets more difficult in high school.
High school's even, yeah. High
Yeah,
school's
we're trying to look at the numbers. We took a good look at them. And they're fairly low right now. They are. They're not.
What is the ratio in high school?
It's hard to really size it up. It depends on you have to go subject by subject.
Okay.
But it's.
We do have a massive spreadsheet.
We do. We have it.
That's why I said I didn't want to get too into the detail, because there's a lot of classes that they show up as classes, but they're shared.
And we have we have a 6th grade class now that's very small.
And how does the K through 5, how does that student-to-teacher ratio compare as to the other South Shore towns that we're surrounded by? Is it pretty similar, or?
Well, it was very similar to where we were in Cohasset,
Okay.
numbers-wise, yeah. It was.
Okay.
Fewer schools, but similar numbers.
It's all a matter. It's really all a matter of margins, and it can't be any different in other towns. If you have, it sort of depends on how big your elementary schools are and how many students are attending. It's if you take a look at some of those enrollment sheets, and what I always say is, you know, if there's, as we've come down a little bit in our number of students per grade, if you have 35 students in a grade at a school, it's gonna be 17 and 18. There's no other way to split it up.
Sure.
If you have 80 not 80, I'm trying to think of a good number here. Yeah, say if you have 70 students, you can't divide that by, if and you're trying to keep it under 20, say we have 80 students, 80 students is fine. You're trying to keep it under 25. That's kind of our limit. Every once in a while, we don't have any over 25 at the moment. But so there's thresholds, 50, 75, and then once you trip that threshold, then you go from three in a grade. So we had 75 students in
3 sections. of
3
it.
sections of 25, that we would do that. But if we had 80, it'd be 4 sections of 20,
Which requires another teacher,
which requires
and
so
if it's kindergarten, requires another ESP.
So it's very, very tricky,
In
and
our
it's just
model.
these little margins that change on an annual basis at a grade level. So, you know, we're focused on that. We're, you know, a big part of our, like, I just told the school committee last night, a big part of our budget, you know, is kindergarten registration. Right now, we're low, and we try to drive that. We want everybody to register as soon as possible, so that we can kind of lock down, because if we have 3 classes at each school, 3 kindergarten classes at each school, that's 15 teachers. If we have 3 at one and only 2 at the 4 other, that's 4 teachers. That's 4 times 70, $280,000. We could, you know, that helps the issues we're having. But it could go the other way. It's not trending that way right now. We set a benchmark of like March 1st the last couple of years, and we're just a little bit below that. But it's all little margins, and it's, you know, students moving in can change things.
And on the teacher note, what are we paying teachers on average in
Yeah, so
town?
we have
The average teacher salary?
Yeah, average teacher salary. This was a dirty one for me. Actually, so wait.
This full-time educator?
Yeah, let me, there's 2, there's,
80,506. That's on page 12.
yeah, I have a, yeah, so there's a couple pieces of data here. Attachment, yeah, right here, page 12.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is state data. So I had to look at neighboring.
Is this salary excluding fringe benefits,
Correct.
health and all that stuff? Okay.
Yeah, that's not a part of this.
So the average salary, this was 2021 data.
Yeah, this is the last available data from the state. I think
Okay.
they haven't done anything since then, so.
So in 2021, and I assume that this has gone up, at least I hope it's gone up.
Yeah, so my quick and dirty average salary of a teacher now is $89,284.
Okay.
That's with I have a big spreadsheet. I took all the salaries, divided it by 330 and change.
And that's collective bargaining agreements that are
and that's,
driving?
and our teachers are up for negotiating next year.
Okay. What year is this of the current CBA?
It is year,
FY26 will be our last year.
But of how many years? When did it
3.
start? 3 years, okay. So this one that we're in right now started after these numbers from fiscal year 2021.
that's correct.
Correct.
And in fiscal year 2021, or after that, was there any kind of a reset in the CBA, or, and I shouldn't say a reset, meaning was there like any kind of major correction?
Adjustment?
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
was it a
the
just-
last agreement. So it's funny because like
I wasn't here,
only a
so-
certain amount of funds, and we've done a really good job. And the union has really worked with us on trying to limit. We trying to limit increases to the 3% range, because that's
Yeah, they've been
generally.
They've been very reasonable, knowing, but they cite these numbers too. of
So
course.
over the last so we had a couple negotiations that focused on our senior teachers and bumping up the upper part of the scale. This last one, we really focused, our opening teacher salary was, you know, I'll say it now, it was pathetic.
It was really low.
$46,000.
I remember that when I left.
And it made-
$46,000, that was for what kind of a teacher? Is that like just
A bachelor's one.
an entry
Yeah,
level?
and very few teachers come in with a bachelor's.
46
these days.
grand.
But, and it made us look, and there's a lot of surveys where they have the B1, Master's 1, you know, and different levels. We made a concert, and the good thing for us financially was we didn't have a lot of teachers there. But we made a concerted effort to move up our opening introductory.
Makes them
steps.
more
So
attractive to.
we
people
moved our
coming into
we
the
moved our
district.
step 1 to our step 5. So now I don't have I can pull up the contract, but I think a B1 now is 56, 57,000, somewhere in that range, which is making us competitive because all across the board. It was something, actually, I borrowed that from Pembroke. Pembroke actually did that a couple of years prior to us. And, you know, they could look and say, or, you know, we're opening set, or, you know, there was 60,000 or something.
It was
like
also,
that.
it was becoming very hard to start people at that
That's the
point.
thing.
I think so. I mean, the average home, or the average purchase price of a home in Marshfield is around $700,000, and
Yeah.
we're starting people at
And again, that was a
$22
few
an
years
hour.
ago, to be fair, but we.
Sure.
The adjustment definitely needed to be made.
And average teacher salaries are a little, I mean, you can, this also plays out when sometimes people compare school to school, and you can look like, what are you spending on it's really a function of how senior and how many years people have been with us. That's
What's the range? I mean, you don't have to go and quote, but just, I mean, range, like, so the lowest end, we're paying around 46,000, you said?
Not
Oh, no, it's
anymore.
more
Oh, not anymore, sorry.
But it's like 56, 57.
Okay, so
And then
Yeah,
the-
somewhere
and
around
the highest
57,000
end
a year.
is,
it's like, you know, a doctorate
was like
at the very last step is
103.
like it's over 100. It's just slightly over 100.
Like slightly over 100,
Yeah,
for somebody with a doctorate
yeah,
that's been here for,
Yeah,
forever.
yeah, I mean, sometimes, some of those folks have risen to be, you know, coordinators or department
Right.
chairs, and they get a stipend associated with that.
well, from the data that you provided us, just to make, and again, I understand that it's old data, but we're the lowest number on here.
It's still,
Compare Norwell,
it's
Situate,
still accurate, that we're,
State?
lower range.
I mean, I don't know what the average home in the state costs, but does it cost $700,000? I don't know.
No.
Anybody know? More?
On
In the
social-
state? No, in the state.
Oh, in the state?
The whole state.
No.
It's,
It's
it's like at least 6.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but the state is line item number 4 here, and it says that this was, again, this is 2021 data, but we were about $6,000 shy of what the state average was in '21.
In 21.
Hiring engineers for 54,000 per year.
How do our retention rates compare with, you know, with numbers like this?
With
you
our-
know? Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we even with this, we'll get a lot of teachers coming to Marshfield from other districts just because of the reputation.
It's a great job.
Not necessarily from Norwell, Situate, Duxbury, or Pembroke, but we've had a few over the years.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish the question, sorry.
you could probably talk. The way education works with the salary schedules and longevity and seniority. Seniority is a big deal because in times like this, when districts start talking about, you know, laying people off, it doesn't go by how many years you've been teaching overall. It's been how many years you've been teaching in a district.
In the district.
So it's a really you know,
It's
for
a safety security factor.
for a teacher, you know, to go, all right, I'm in Marshfield and I'm making $80,000, but I can make an additional $8,000 in Duxbury. It's the way the system is set up. It's difficult to make that Now, there are certain subject areas at the secondary level.
Yeah, that are very high, and high demand. To answer your question, our retention, without having any real data, has been really good. Yeah, staff have stayed here. We have a lot of staff that have progressed their whole career here. And we have a lot of staff that live here.
I was going to ask you, do the majority of our teachers live here in Marshfield, or they all live out of town?
I did pull that. That
There you
is
go. I know they live.
page 15. Page 15.
Oh, look at that. Prepared for, I love it.
30, almost a third of our teachers live in town.
Almost a third.
Almost half of our employees live in town.
And those are strong numbers. And that shows, well, it shows the quality of our town. And I think people want to live here, raise a family here, and work here. And that's a tribute to people in this room, people who have worked in the town, and also people who live. It's a great town. So you can see that in the numbers.
Okay. Last question on an operational standpoint, I just wanted to ask you to understand is paraprofessionals. They make up a good chunk of the staff in terms of numbers. I don't know. I saw a little bit of the labor cost data, but how many paraprofessionals do we employ? We have 350 or whatever it was teachers.
71.4 FTE currently.
There you go.
71 paraprofessionals. And the paraprofessionals, just so I'm clear, those are all of your aides, your.
Yeah,
They kind of range the gamut in what they support, right? Everything from a reading specialist to somebody
yeah, they
working in
provide
special
instructional
education.
and academic support, sometimes one-on-one support, small group support, depending if it's a special education need, behavioral.
That's just paraprofessionals though. If you include tutors, which do a lot of the same work, it's basically 100, 99.4.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So with tutors, it's 190, okay.
100. Yeah.
100, okay.
And that's been interesting over the years. I mean, I don't have the data, but anecdotally, we've reduced the number of ESPs to a certain extent, but our number of tutors has increased.
Sure.
So it's kind of, it reaches its level about the same.
So in regards to budget, a few questions there. I know hopefully everybody's asking their questions. You're not tired of my questions yet. Brian's.
Just ask one question.
Yeah,
on this
please.
before we go into the numbers. Just, is your total staff in here as well, administration, so forth?
Wait, what's that?
Total staff number in there?
Total, like every employee,
Yeah.
770.
That includes.
That includes
Custodians.
substitutes.
Drivers.
Yeah, includes everybody. Anybody that works for the public schools.
What was it, 7 what?
770.
770?
So the teachers,
40
instructional, people that are actually given education are about 430 or so.
Including the tutors and the ESPs, that's probably about right.
No, I have that. What's that?
He said 430.
Yeah, I mean that's roughly that
There's
very
326
first-
plus 100.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what I was thinking too.
And
Yeah, there's
700, and they're included
actually
in
the
the
last
770?
that last page also includes clerical staff.
Do they have their own bargaining unit, the clerical staff?
Yeah, so that last page, it's educator staff and teachers. So that educator staff also does include clerical, and it includes therapists and specialists in addition. So that's, I would say, roughly 430 range, somewhere in there.
In regards to.
I'm just
no, go ahead.
confused with the 770 number and these numbers.
Is that?
You said 770 total?
Yeah, I'm pulling that. That's from the data just taken today for all staff,
770 total staff.
total staff,
Including teachers, tutors,
everybody,
and so forth.
anybody that works.
Custodians, your custodial staff,
page
your,
this-
But you had asked about those who actually provide education,
I got you.
you, educational services.
4:30 or so.
That's,
Yeah, roughly.
that's about right.
Yeah.
Roughly 4:30.
Thank you. That's it.
Yep.
I have one unrelated question here on these unfilled vacancies.
Until what?
Vacancies on
Yeah.
page 17.
Yep.
Yeah.
So are those part of the budget or not part of?
No, so what happened last year, through the process, you know, we didn't meet the level of service, so, we had, those are either retirements or, you know, that very first one is an example, so we, in FY '24, we actually created an administrative position, the first one in forever, but Patty
Central
Casey,
office administrative position.
the central office administrative position, but she accepted the Furnace Brook Middle School principal position, and we didn't fill it.
Didn't fill it.
So all these positions were in our
24
FY
budget.
'24 budget
Just,
and are not in our budget now.
oh, so they're not in the budget?
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I guess follow-up question on that. So how do you make do without that floating nurse? That one seems like a required one.
Well, we have, so that comes back to those numbers things. We have
So the
increased our
numbers
nursing
change.
staff because of the mandates.
Demographics.
But we really do need a floating nurse. Substitute nurses are so difficult to get, and you really need them. And we have diabetic students, we have students who have significant needs, so it's really hard not to have floating nurses. Now, I will say, we have increased our nursing staff, so that does help. And we do have a director.
That's secondary level.
Yeah. But it's difficult.
But on the very first page, so typically we have a financial plan where we're looking at what we want to add to the district, to the benefit of the district. Usually that number could be, you know, 800,000, 900,000. It's only 350 this year, but that 350 includes
That
That-
position we just talked about.
that administrative position, the floating nurse, and then, some after-school programming that we also-
Support programming. It's
Support
not academic support programming, not
And when you
just-
say that,
That's it. We knew the situation, so.
we weren't going to go wild on that.
so when you say that 350, that's like line 5 here on the front sheet?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so I guess if that was already previously budgeted for and approved last year and just not filled, why does it kind of flow through as like a separate?
Well, it's not included in the 57,702 of our current fiscal budget right now.
I thought, for 25, because it was for 24?
Yeah, it was in 24.
Oh, but it's not.
It's not in 25. We're
Looking at
looking to
26.
reinstate it for 26.
Oh,
That was-
gotcha.
Some of it.
yeah.
Like there are social studies teachers on that.
Oh, not all that stuff,
Yeah, we're not filling all that. It's just, there's a couple.
But that is where, if you look at that, what number, 17?
17 is unfilled vacancies for
Yeah,
FY
and
'25.
this is kind of what I mentioned earlier. You know, the middle school is difficult to get a hold of, but when we had somebody leave, you know, that's like one person. Actually, I don't think they left on their own. But there's 3 positions there at the middle school: an art teacher, a science teacher, and an English reading teacher. That there was one retirement, one person left us. Actually, 2 retirements and one person left us. And then when we had the opportunity to look at that, we were able to make the decision, move a few pieces around.
Well, and for instance, we shared art teachers across clusters, you know, we did, across grade levels, I should say. We always tried them across clusters, but there are some things that we did that were teetering with breaking up the cluster models.
But that's a function of our current 6th grade. If you look at the enrollment, is tiny. It's low.
And that's why we did it.
So we made those adjustments accordingly. And now there's not any huge classes coming in, but you know, I think it's 230, by far our smallest class in 6th grade. Again, so we were able to make those adjustments. If we get 270, 280 moving in, we might have to look at readjusting back the other way. So that's where we try to, it's really difficult at the middle school to make those adjustments, but we do when we can.
Can I ask, what is assistant director, I'm sorry, admin, the next one, the administrative assistant technology?
Carolyn Hubbard, retired. So our tech department, so
Oh, it's for the.
I could go on and on about our technology. We have the same amount of staffing.
It was a clerical.
We added a
position.
clerical person.
You added a clerical person to
Yeah.
the technology department, okay,
And,
that's.
and then
Yeah,
when we,
half-time originally.
and we didn't fill it.
But Carolyn retired and we didn't fill it
Oh.
because we knew a,
So they're just,
make this work.
that one is just, we're just doing without.
Okay.
yeah, for now. I mean,
For now.
if things turn around, that's something. Our technology staff, 4 individuals. We've had 4 individuals. We had a director of technology 14 years ago, kind of quasi position, but then there's only 3 other people in the office, and I do have a list of technology of what they do, and it's crazy.
They do a lot. So this
I mean,
person organized a lot of it, and
The amount of technology,
they're doing it on their own.
the amount of
They can
technology
do.
increases over the last, it really started with the new high school, with one-to-one, all the technology. It's everywhere now, and the amount of needs there is crazy.
Yeah, the new high school, I mean, it did wonders for our kids, because it's a beautiful school and facility in our town. It's used as a town building. A lot of things happen, walking track, events there. It also used a lot of financial flow into our schools, and technology is one of them. Some of our problems now is that it's a 12-year-old building, and all that expensive technology is starting to wear out. And so, one of the tough parts about getting such a beautiful school, beautiful technology, is you got to figure out ways to replace those. And, we're
And
certainly
I
working
mean-
with the town on that too, but these are,
So, in regards to the buildings, there's been a lot of discussion about short and long-term future capital improvements for our school buildings. Do you have any kind of a written capital improvement plan or anything that we have for our buildings? I mean, one of the things that we hear come up again and again and again is the age of our, especially our elementary schools.
yeah.
We've talked a lot about roofs, right? But it's not just roofs, I'm sure, that need repairing and whatnot. What is our projected plan for what that looks like going forward, and how are we?
Well, we have our capital plan. I didn't put it in here, but as you know,
We have the roofs for the one in the MSBA.
Yeah, MSBA
From
was
Martin City.
approved, so we still haven't had a project manager given to us yet, but.
But is the capital plan that the schools have, is that something that's publicly available that we can?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
review? Okay,
I can forward it.
perfect.
5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, the facilities issues on there are the ADA accessibility at South River.
Yeah.
We did receive some funding to put, if you've been there, there's a new ramp put in front. Wasn't handicap accessible at all. So we received about $170,000 a couple years ago. That project was finished. The second phase of that is a lift. It's our only elementary school building that has 3 floors. So again, that's not accessible. So that's one of our things on our list. That's estimated at $765,000. And then we talked roofs over and over. Besides the MSBA, besides the Martinson project, which is in the MSBA queue now, we have issues at Daniel Webster and Governor Winslow. The Daniel Webster roof has a life expectancy of about 1 to 3 years. Working with Fred Russell, facilities manager, we've come up with a plan to
Extend
have
the
it
life.
extend the life of that for a significant amount less money than what we're paying for Martin's
The membrane.
for the whole thing. So Daniel Webster's 1 to 3 years, and Governor Winslow is 3 to 5 years. So they're both on our plan as restoration. The $1.3 million range estimate for both of them But compared to 6 or 7 million, there's a big difference there. Those are our primary facility needs, right on the forefront.
Is the
There's a
roofs?
couple other there's a couple other items.
Is that right? It's the roofs are the primary, the
Well, they're,
priority?
I mean, obviously, they're essential. because
Sure,
If you
yeah.
don't have a roof.
Yeah,
course.
there's a few other items. I mean,
But they're the biggest ticket items, it sounds like, is
Yeah.
what you're, okay.
Yeah.
Bathrooms,
There's all of our buildings are have had the floors replaced, rugs replaced. We still have some work to do at Daniel Webster. That's on here with flooring. The Martinson Auditorium, there was a proposal put together to rehab that space. We did that with Furnace Brook a few years ago. Actually, probably about 10 years ago. You might have been there.
I was there.
And then we also started air conditioning project at the middle school. It really started with the second level on the new wing that baked like a oven.
It was bad up there.
So we did install this. This was several years ago, and we have on our plan to continue that process. Eventually, we'd like to have that building a year-round building that you can utilize in the summer, like our high school. So there's money there, and then there's another item that we've begun to work on is ADA accessibility and rehabilitation of our restrooms across the district.
Particularly elementaries.
Yeah, it's.
They're showing their age.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a good job with our. I mean, it's no secret. You said. I mean, South River is a 1950 building.
That's our oldest?
That's our oldest building.
Thankfully, they built things well back in the 1950s. You can definitely see.
But over the years, we've focused on the envelope, on the roofs. Our windows are in good shape. Our HVAC, heating is in good shape. So we've worked that through. But the roofs coming up over the next couple of years it's an issue.
Well, and I remember at the town meeting, we took a vote on some roofs for, you'll have to help me remember, was it Governor Winslow, where there was a grant involved from the state? Do I have the right school?
It's the MSBA, it's the
Martins.
MSBA grant. Tom,
Furnace
you just
Brook.
said.
Furnace, was it
Furnace
Furnace?
Brook
We've
had
done-
we had a roof done just when I was leaving, and
Wasn't it Martinson?
No, it was the
just
one that we had at
recently,
the,
just recent.
yeah, town
Oh, just
meeting in
recently?
December.
Tom,
That was
did
Martin.
we-
Oh, Martinson, yeah.
It was
Martinson,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
Martinson is so that's the story here is that Martinson is now beyond rehab
right.
of just replacing the membrane. It's going to be a full roof replacement.
And that involved a state grant. So one of the things I was curious about is in the current amendment, or in the current environment rather, where we know that the town's been suspended in participating from 17 different grant programs and been advised that compliance with the MBTA Communities Act, if we don't change that, then we'll continue to be excluded from grant programs and whatnot. Are there any grant programs that are going to impact our capital planning or any of our educational programs that you're aware of?
I don't believe so. I haven't heard any of that discussion. MSBA is definitely. Mike would know better.
I think.
MSBA is separate.
It's separate. Same thing
Separate
with
funding
chapter
source.
70.
Yeah.
Chapter 70 is separate.
And then the majority of our, I think almost all the grants that we receive are federal grants. So I don't foresee any issues, at least
yeah.
for the district.
Other than the fact that our grants have been decreasing, without even having the MBTA.
Where do those, the majority of grants that we have received were federal grants?
Correct, IDE.
Well, the Title I, Title IIA.
And which group within the federal government administers those grants? Is that,
Department of Ed. Yeah.
Department of Ed, yeah.
okay, got it.
So, there's a whole nother, that's a whole other story.
What's that? It's still, that's right. Regarding our teachers, I know that they're on a CBA right now. That expires in 2026.
Correct.
What is the increase that's the average increase? Are teachers on a stepped system? Is that how?
They are
Yeah,
steps and
so-
columns.
Yep.
Okay.
So 12, so there's 6, we just changed it. So there's bachelor's, master's, master's 15, master's 30 credits, 15 credits, 30
CAGs.
credits.
Yeah.
Um,
CAGs.
CAGs and double masters, and then doctorates. So there's 6 educational steps, and then there's
Years of
12 years of service, 1 through 12, and then there's 3 super steps after that, based upon longevity, which is time in the district.
So we got, out of the 770 staff that we have, staff, faculty, teachers, everybody, right? Half of them are classroom teachers, about, right? Roughly half. The rest of them
About
are.
half our budget is classroom teachers. Is classroom teachers.
The rest of them are, that's right, so half of them are classroom teachers, but in terms of our labor budget for schools, that represents about 60% of the labor budget, right? Because we have a $52 million labor budget that's been submitted for people, right? Personnel costs, exclusive of health, right?
Yeah.
So this is just salaries.
We're about 85% salary.
Okay, so 60% of total labor cost is coming from classroom teachers. Classroom teachers make up about 50% of the total full-time equivalents, right?
Yep.
FTEs in the school district, which means that 40% of the cost is made up of non-classroom teachers,
Roughly, yep.
roughly. And that 40%, which is again about half of the staff size, total staff size, are they all covered under CBAs as well?
No, not
Well,
all.
quite a few. I mean, so
Quite a few as in like greater than 50%, or quite a few as in?
Yeah, we have our custodians are covered, our food service workers are covered.
Van
our
drivers.
Van drivers are covered, our bus drivers they're outsourced.
not ours,
so they're
but
not ours.
so the teacher's contract, the teacher's contract is not just classroom teachers.
It's ESPs.
ESPs are a separate unit, but
Yeah.
even just the teacher's contract includes behavioral specialists, adjustment counselors,
Correct.
guidance counselors, psychologists,
They're all under the
nurses,
term teachers.
therapists. They're all in the
And
teachers.
are they all in the classroom teacher budget?
Yep.
They are, okay.
Oh, no, not, they're
Oh.
not in that
The
number.
classroom teacher unit.
Unit, got it, in terms of union classification, but in terms
Yes.
of our budget,
Yeah, that classroom teacher line.
they're in the non-classroom teacher category.
At 30 million under classroom teachers, that includes your traditional teacher,
Yep.
and your special education teachers.
So what is and again, ballpark here, you don't have to look it up if you don't know it, but what is the average teacher getting for an increase this year based upon the existing CBA? And I realize that it's complicated because you got steps and
Oh,
everything
it's-
else,
yeah,
but
it's
if you were to just do the mean average,
The raw
just the
raw
COLA?
total. This was
Or COLA and steps.
it is,
all in. Granted, it was the last year of our contract, and that includes so it gets difficult because the people that aren't stepping. So there's which is now over half of our unit. Like it's
half of your unit what?
Because
half of the
they've
unit.
hit,
Half the unit does not get a step
because
once
they've
they-
hit step 12.
if they've been here long enough.
Because they're at the top.
And they're
Yeah,
waiting for that
yeah.
super step, so they're not stepping.
There's a super step after 12?
Yes.
Yes, but it's it's based on longevity, based on time in a district. 15
So if we were to go
20.
back in time 10, 15, 20 years ago, would it still be about the same ratio percentage that we're at that top step, about 50%?
I think we're in an interesting part right now where we're getting very few retirements.
Is our median age of teachers
Like I think-
increasing?
I
Is
think
it
Dr.
the
Sullivan
same?
came
Is it
in, and
decreasing?
a number of people like
When I started?
right in
I
that-
started in 96 in the district, and then I left. Then I came back. Anyway, but that group is starting to
but they still have a few more years.
still a few more years. There's a group still there.
There's a heavy group that are going to retire, but we hit a
It's
down.
about 8, but
we-
I don't know who's counting.
We hit a down. It actually all relates. It all relates to Proposition 2.5 in 1990.
I guess the reason why I'm asking these questions is because if you look at the trajectory of personnel expenses, labor costs, and then non-labor costs for school budget, right? The school budget that's submitted is 60 million, 57 million, something like that. Sorry if I don't have it exact, but it's in that ballpark, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it, the amount that we spend on, not on labor, so the non-labor costs, so which is utilities, transportation, and tuition, out-of-district tuition, and that, because that's the majority of it,
That's
right?
almost all of it.
That's literally 50+% of the non-labor expense. And the non-labor expense is around like $7-8 million a year, meaning that $7-8 million a year of the budget is not going to fund salaries, et cetera, but it's going to fund for, again, transportation and utilities and what was the third one I just mentioned? But it's going to pay for all of that and materials and all that stuff. Other district tuition. Thank you. So that cost, though, if you look at it on an actual real dollars since 2005, it has not changed, which is actually really impressive. Somehow, all of the costs to keep the buildings up and running, the utility costs to keep the technology in there, to keep the buses running and everything else, somehow the total actual cost has not changed, even with inflation. Going back to 2005, I don't even know what it is, but I'm imagining, I was actually just looking at inflationary indexes today, it's at least 50% between 2005 and today. Going back to 2009, it's about, well, maybe not 50%, maybe closer to 42%, but it was like 33%. It's looking today, if you look at the CPIU average, or between 2009 and a couple of years ago. So 33%, but yet ours has stayed pretty much the same exact number. But labor is jumped up like that. And if you look at the number of filled vacancy or filled positions, right, the number of FTEs, our enrollment has gone down by about 25% over that same period, but the number of FTEs has not changed pretty much at all. It's been pretty much the same. But our costs on that labor have gone up. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the cost on labor has actually gone up more than what CPIU is. So what I'm trying to figure out is, and it's not implying that we're paying more than COLA in terms of just annual increases, but I'm trying to understand why has it gone up greater than in the inflationary index, and is the reason because of step changes?
That plays a role in it.
Okay.
Over the last few contracts, we've done a really good job on having our units recognize that the steps are real dollars, and we only have a limited amount of funds. So I did calculate the total increase, and this is rough data, and so in the just teachers, 3.74%. So that was all in.
This is for this year's budget versus last year's?
Correct. No, this is projecting for 26.
For 26, I'm sorry, yeah, that's what I meant.
So
Yeah.
that means the same staffing moving forward with all our step and lane changes.
Okay.
Right there, like, because we have our FY25 schedule, we have our FY26 schedule, our current staffing moving them over 3.74%. Now we know how we mitigate that typically is through retirements and attrition.
Yeah.
And we can we're hopeful, I mean, we don't want anybody tired that they don't want to retire, but if we do have a few more retirements come in, we tweak that. I typically, if we get retirements early enough, I will include it in our budget number. So we do I'm trying to think offhand. Oh, math teacher. So math teacher, if you look at the, we have a bad idea list, and I've already changed that math teacher
From 100 to 65.
From 98,000 to 65,000. 65,000 being a master's 4, I think.
Right.
But since we fixed the FY, now in the background, I have a big spreadsheet that I'm changing every day, every time there's changes, and there's changes every day. It's
And that-
700 employees
Yeah.
that come and go. It's a continual changing of that
And
number.
that's a responsibility too, because as someone who's hiring, you know, you're often presented with a person that has more credentials. So we're trying to, it's.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the upside, right, is that you got 50% of your people that are at a step 12 at the very high level in terms of experience, which is a good thing, right? In terms of we have a lot of experienced people here in the district educating our children, which is fantastic. The downside is obviously that, you know, the cost piece of that, but that's, you know,
The big thing is,
what it is.
and this has been something I've been trying to, it's something we worked on when we increased that step 1 from 45 to 55, making our step changes 1 through 12, making them smaller. The issue we get into is, you know, you have someone in their 3rd year, when they go 3rd year to 4th year, those increases can be 7, 8, 9%, just going boom and over. So now you have all those, the younger
Plus the
teachers
COLA.
that are stepping, you know, they're going 55, 59, 63. You know, 59 to 63 doesn't seem like a big deal, but what's that percentage? 7%. But then you have the rest of the unit who aren't getting any steps. They want their 3% at least to keep up with being able to pay the bills.
so the folks that aren't stepping, they're just getting the COLA adjustment,
That's just, yeah.
which is right around 3%.
So it's a push and pull between those individuals that are not getting a step increase, just getting their COLA. So we
Yeah.
need to give them something that is fair, and then have to deal with the step increases for the younger part of the unit. It's shifted a little bit over time. I think the last time I looked, I think it was 45, 55. So we have 45 stepping in the teacher's contract and 55 non-steppers. So it becomes that push and pull, and that's what I explained a little bit earlier was the last 3 contracts, the previous 2 contracts, and this is where the unit's been really will work with us is, you know, we look, I present a spreadsheet that shows the total cost, and it'll show it at the bottom, and we want to try to keep salaries typically in that 3% range. I mean, the teacher's contract is a whole different animal because of all those like all our other contracts have 4 steps, you know, 4 steps, 5 steps. You know, our administration gets 3%. Ifs, ands, or buts. I've been 3% for the last 15 years. That 3%, and that's our focus. So like this 3.74% is the final year of the contract. Typically, you kind of look at it progressively. You know, you kind of kick the can a little bit. So, but that 3%, 3.74% could, all it takes is a couple, you know, 3 or 4 retirements could save us well over $100,000, which gets that 3.74% probably down to about 3.5. You know, roughly in that. You know, it starts to move down a little bit. It starts to become more manageable. So.
Yeah, I guess, very simplistically thinking, right? You have, again, enrollments come down. You've very amazingly, I'd love to understand more about it, kept the non-labor expense at a real, or at the same exact level without realizing. But when you look at how much labor costs have gone up, and again, I think it sounds like, at least from the numbers you presented, we have more to do in order to support our classroom teachers and how they're compensated. But leaving that for another day, we've seen a tremendous amount of increase in cost on that, and we're not increasing our non-labor expense at all, and it just seems like something is
Yeah,
going
well,
to have
I
to
can
give.
speak a little bit to the non-labor. You did bring something up about the transportation costs. So, for example, you know, in our transportation contract, which is typically a 3 + 2 with 2 option years, it's a 3% increase over that period. Where we get into the double digits is when the contract's open. And so we have to go out to bid, and we get a bid that might be a 14-15% increase. Actually, our last bid was even more, was a little bit more than that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it went from 1.4 million to 1.8 million. So
How,
it's a
how often,
huge-
how
Every
far
5
into our
years.
existing, every 5 years, and how far are we into the existing one?
We still have another couple years to go. And actually, this is year 2. No, we're only in year 2 right now.
And families pay,
But that's what I was going to speak to. So that's the transportation fee, which, as difficult it was for me personally.
it was a
yeah,
Marshfield thing, or that's a state?
Well,
we were one of the last few
we were, yeah. it's-
holdouts.
It was state, it was state.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's very
Is it a
common.
requirement, or it's just a practice that,
It's a practice that most, every district
Yeah.
puts in. Marshfield, Tom's right, Marshfield is, I don't know, is
We-
Situate good? Maybe they don't.
Marshfield and Hingham were the last two. Hingham's putting one in this year.
so out of the $1.7 million that we spent on or that's slated to be spent on transportation in fiscal year 2026, what percentage of that is being recovered?
Yeah, so it's about 250,000 annually via fee.
Yeah,
Okay.
fees
And that
up.
allowed, so when you look at the non-labor expenses, and it's 8 million, we've done things over the years to kind of adjust to that. So that's a perfect example on the transportation front. We had a contract that had renewed at 3% for 5 years. It was about 1.4 million. We put it out to bid, it goes to 1.8 roughly, so that's a it was almost a 30% increase. That 30% increase, that's also the year we put in the fee.
$180 per year.
So if a $400,000 increase in our transportation contract offset by 250,
Right.
unfortunately paid by the taxpayer, the parents that are paying for it.
Right.
But that minimized that increase, that 400,000. by
Well, I can
250.
only imagine that cost will continue to grow in the future. but-
Well, and we've also been, over the years, when we put in full-day kindergarten, for instance, is another thing.
Yeah.
We absorbed that, I imagine, through Chapter 70 money.
Yeah, that was a process.
Yep, it's a process where we used to charge for full-day K, and
We went from half day to full day. We had 1 year where
now it's
it
free.
was, yeah.
And that was only like a South Shore thing, right?
Well,
The
that's a
rest of the
practice.
state
So
did
when
it.
I was in
Yeah.
Cohasset, we just did that, like, last year. So, I mean, we were one of the, I think there were 13 school districts that didn't have it, and
There's still a
Cohasset was
couple
one of
that are
them.
still trying to,
Still a
Pembroke's
couple are
still
trying to.
trying to.
But anyway, but
there's
that's,
still
on
things.
the other side, that's something we did to take
Yeah.
that cost away from families.
Yeah, I mean, and
I
that's,
guess
that,
it's how you look
that
at
was a
it.
process, if you looked at our kindergarten class sizes prior to that, we inflated class sizes to a certain extent, to make that happen. When we had half-day programming, our kindergarten classes were 13, 14. But when we instituted full-day kindergarten with the payment, it went to about 20. 20 was our max. So we were able to take these teachers, move to there, and it was a whole and it kind of over a 2-year period, we were able to do it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, it feels like this very careful balancing act, right? And which leaves me with two questions in relation to this is, number one, again, school enrollment's come down, so we got 25% less pupils that we're educating on an annual basis now, and realizing that could change in the future or whatnot. Our labor costs have not changed. In fact, they've gone up, right, pretty dramatically. About 40% of our total labor costs are from non-classroom teachers. So we've done an amazing job, obviously. I wonder if it's too much of an amazing job on squeezing the
That's
15% of our budget, because that's literally all it is that's non-labor. As labor's growing up and taking bigger and bigger, it seems like we're kind of heading towards this cliff, right, where
And the inflation is just.
and how much are we going to eke out of it? So there's two answers, right? Either one is we've got to find more money somewhere, or number two, we've got to be more efficient. you guys have obviously done an amazing job from the efficiency perspective. Outside of classroom teachers, because they're obviously the front lines, they're critical to everything that we do. Is there anything from an efficiency perspective and just in terms of our general operations that we can do on the non-classroom teachers staff that helps right size us and keep us kind of where we're at, or is?
Well, again,
Yeah.
our special education model is very inclusive, and it does require, like, if you go to some districts, there's a lot more pullout of the general education classroom than we have.
What does that mean, pull out?
So it means that students who need services on an IEP grid are being taken out of the general ed class to get the services. Our model pushes in, which is
Yeah, you said you want them to be in the
better for the
classroom, not,
kids.
yeah.
But in the elementary level, it requires more intensive, more staff to do that. So, that's a wire we kind of tread on, and we don't want to, if you go over it, then you don't have as inclusive environment. It's a different way to do business. So, like,
And
that to me isn't something we want to do, but.
Well, I wasn't asking about, like, insinuating that I have the answer. I'm just
No,
asking you,
yeah.
like, so is that the only lever?
I don't know, I mean, we've
potential
thought about,
lever?
like, we've spent a lot of time recently trying, other than like looking at our classroom numbers at the upper levels, which I think Tom did a nice job of explaining that middle school's tricky. High school's also tricky, but, that would be the area that we try to be more efficient with, but you wanna make sure that our students have, the best possible opportunities and the most options at high school. We're a comprehensive high school still, the way we're designed. We have a technology and career track that is robust, and I'd put up against any non-vocational high school in the state, quite frankly. I mean, if you go into Marshfield High School, you see that film studio, you see that marine fabrication, you see the boats that are coming out of there, you see the culinary we have. It's tough because you're trying to keep that programming robust and strong. I don't know.
I mean, the fee aspect of it has, allowed us to
raise
move
our
that.
fees. I mean, but that impacts.
There's nothing administratively or otherwise that we can do from just a general efficiency point of view? Again, I'm just asking, I'm trying to ask,
I was gonna highlight, so we briefly touched it, but out of district tuition coming into the district.
Mhm.
So in that constant battle to try to provide services for less, we've created programs in our schools, and we have gotten to the point where we're pulling in a significant amount of funding that goes directly to pay for a lot of the staffing that's being provided to any students from other towns that are joining that program, but our own students as well.
How many students are we talking about that,
The tuition in
I knew that was coming.
from
I was like,
neighboring
oh,
towns.
talking
Um,
50,
But I have $500,000 in our budget offsetting our staffing costs provided from other districts.
That you're pulling in.
Are we collecting enough?
Yeah.
Because we
and
have
it's-
programming that they don't.
yeah.
No, I understand that. The question
And
is.
coincidentally, we do send a couple students to other towns as well. I mean, it's kind of a give and take.
I guess my question is, are we charging a fair amount to those outside towns that are, pupils that are receiving services?
We're in the process of reviewing that right now for next year, because we might tweak it up a little bit, just to.
I'm just thinking, like, what are the levers, right? Are we charging enough for outside, students from other communities that are coming into our community? Are we charging enough there? Is there anything from an efficiency standpoint that we can do in terms of our overhead, right? Costs of actually, the management of the district, not impacting programs. And I get too, not only do you not want to impact the programs, but you also have state laws and everything else. And so, you leave those where they're at. But in terms of how we're just trying to manage the administration of it, how much has that changed, or is there any areas for change? Because otherwise, again, when you're, like, if there's no change there, there's only one direction this goes.
Yeah.
And that's to, the big giant override word. Because otherwise, I just don't understand how we continue to go at this rate.
It's a
I
constant.
mean, if I'm missing something,
In all honesty, last year's closeout, like, like it was
Tight.
there were a couple days there where I was breathing heavy, because it was, the circuit breaker funding, we only rolled over 200,000+. That's not where, that's not where we want to be. Because,
Yeah.
So, just going back to the question of, or to the point that enrollment has fallen so much, it looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, the total staff, though, you're talking a lot about the teachers and all that, and that makes perfect sense, with the special needs and all that. But the rest of the staff, the least numbers of them has actually gone up a little bit.
Right.
yeah,
And
I
so
mean,
are those no necessarily, like, the rest of the staff tied to the program?
are you looking at the last page?
Well, they're
Yeah.
therapists,
Yeah.
aren't they therapists and
Yeah.
OG tutors and?
That's what I was trying to address
Speech
with
pathologists,
just the
a lot
needs
of
of
that
the
Okay, so
students.
they're not in the teaching staff.
There's a lot of those are part of the special education.
Yeah, I mean,
We can look at it, I mean, we should.
if you take one of our smaller elementary schools, besides the actual classrooms, and going down, there's not a whole, I mean, just hypothetical, school A, 20 classrooms. Say there were 25 classrooms, and it went to 20 classrooms, so that's 5 less teachers. But those 5 less classroom teachers have been replaced by a social worker, we've always had school psychologists, but then you have adjustment counselors, therapists,
BCBA.
And they don't,
behavioral, so no.
they're not in
so
this line of teachers.
That
They're in this other
they
line.
don't touch that teacher. Some of the special education teachers do. So you go from 25 to 20, and then you have a few more special education teachers, and then you have all those outside providers. But then outside of that, you got a principal, you got an assistant principal, you have a custodian there in the day, and you either have 1 or 2 custodians cleaning at night.
Yeah,
That's it.
I mean, there's
It's
undesirable
there's-
things,
there's
like
no-
closing an elementary school, things like that, the town, I don't think there's an appetite for that, I'll tell you right now, but, those would be cost-saving measures.
And then additionally, with the SSVT vote, we're gonna have, that'll be added on as an additional cost in terms of total educational spending, district-wide, right?
That's an interesting one. I mean, we've had discussions.
We're working that through with the town, but, typically there's a share there between the town and the schools, and in other districts, it can come off as a warrant article, or there's different ways to go about it. We're just trying to collaborate to figure out the best way to do it.
Yeah, historically, we've had single-digit students attending South Shore Vocational over 4 grades.
But we were just picking up on the extra spots that were available.
Yeah,
from the
as not a member,
groups.
there would be
Yeah.
2 or 3 students per grade level that might get in there.
Marshfield's a blue collar, has a real blue collar element, so it's gonna be a popular.
But now, once that we've joined, and it's a cost that, I mean, the town meeting voted for it as a town, in many respects, it's a town, I'm not saying municipal side, school side, I'm saying town of Marshfield.
Yeah, it's town of Marshfield side.
It's a
which
weird thing
includes
because,
shared responsibility.
because we have a lot of students that go elsewhere. We have students that go to charter schools, we have students that go to private schools.
How many?
This one sticks out.
How many
South
go
Shore-
where?
Yeah, you said we have a lot of students go to other schools. How many, when we say a lot, what is a lot?
Oh, I mean, I don't have the numbers right off the top, but I did mention today that, previously we'd have a good amount of students go to BC High or Notre Dame. Those numbers have dropped significantly.
Really?
Well,
over the-
they dropped significantly when we built the new high school.
Yeah,
Are we paying for that?
No, we don't pay.
Oh, okay, all right.
And that's the difference. So
nice.
charter school. So the charter school is interesting because it goes to the Chapter 70 formula.
Mhm.
So you don't get a bill.
Yeah.
Like in some aspects you get a little less funding through Chapter 70. Now we're in a special situation that we're just being held harmless, getting a per pupil increase each year, a small per pupil increase. But the way the South Shore, way the vocational tech works when you join is you get a bill, which is, it's completely outside of any other transactions our students have. When a student goes, if a student goes to a private school, either a Catholic school or a Milton or a Thayer, they just leave. They take their, they don't take $18,000 with them at all. It's not that. It's one tick on the Chapter 70 formula that formulates down into our 15 million that we get. So you can take it's not, it doesn't correlate directly, but it's a small amount of money that goes with that student. If a student goes to a charter school, it's a little bit more complicated because the funding does come in and it goes to the charter school. But the vocational school is a whole different animal because it not only comes through the charter formula, but then the vocational school also hands you an assessment. And if the numbers continue, it's way too big of a chunk out of our operating budget. It just,
And
it's
that, and that's
impossible.
not how the other towns have handled it.
Yeah. And it's not done that way in any of the other eight towns that are part of. It's typically
Well, at
either an article in a warrant or part of the overall fixed costs of
Off
the
the
town.
top, yeah.
But
On the non-labor costs, I'm aware that there's a lot of teachers, it's what I've seen. A lot of teachers spend a lot of their own personal money on different supplies and whatnot. I don't know how much of it is they're not allowed or what, I don't know. But I'm just aware that it happens a lot. Are we doing what's necessary? I mean, they're already, they're already making what they're making, and
We need to be able to provide them with those supplies.
yeah, I think it's
well,
that's always kind of a sticky subject because we set out to provide what's needed for the classroom, and if it comes back to me that we're not providing something for the classroom, we make it happen because that's what we're here for.
Well, that's what I want to understand is that Mr. Sullivan just said that we need to, but is that need being established inside fiscal year 2026 budget? Or is that
Yeah,
something that
I
we
mean,
haven't addressed yet?
There is that. The one thing we talked about actually goes the other way, which isn't good. We're one of the few districts that do provide supplies for our students. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there are a lot of districts
When
that,
you were younger, you used to go out school shopping with your parents. Buy your binders, your notebooks.
families.
It's elementary level. At the elementary level, we provide all that for each student. We were talking to our elementary principals, and they suggested maybe because that's a rarity these days. And
But we feel we
do
need
that. We do that with that 8 million. That hasn't changed. So, but on the opposite front, though, the point about teachers buying, I don't. And again, I haven't talked to our principals and our teachers.
I haven't heard that as a loud
I don't think
call. I've heard a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that's not something that has been a chorus that I'm hearing.
I may be stepping a little bit too far, but I think
But
what
teachers
that
do buy
is it's not necessarily supplies. It's teachers out of their own heart buying things for their classroom
make it
to make it a
special.
more welcoming environment. And if we could that's the component that if we could provide that funding, we would.
Yeah, well,
we gotta come up with a better way to
that's
do
the
it.
pride in teaching too. That's why, you can't really quantify the amount of hours. I mean, there's salaried employees, right? So I know one of your questions was how many hours does that quantify to? You can't, they're always doing work at home. They're bringing work home to do it constantly. So, and this fits in with that. It's like they want to create special environments for their classroom, and surely they're spending their own money. are we trying to provide the essentials for them? We really are, and we're listening and trying to do what we can for them, but I'm sure if you had teachers here, they'd nod their heads off telling you that they are buying things. I bought things when I was a teacher, for sure. And I was
Just-
certainly getting supplies from Mr. Miller a lot of times. Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things that there's always more you want to do for your students.
You do,
And you
yeah,
wanna
it's
provide
just the
more,
nature of the
and-
teacher.
Have you looked into whether there's any charities or other type of organization that can help with some of these costs, especially? you
Some
know-
of the
There
supply
was a,
costs.
Yeah,
there was, like, 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
ago,
Mark
there-
Stiles' office, I think.
there was a
Charity, yeah.
it just kind of percolated up and
In this district?
in this
Laurel-
district.
It was Laurel.
Laurel Kenny.
Laurel Kenny
Yeah.
did it.
Ah,
Yeah.
Do you, what approximately, what's the cost of the school supplies, like, especially at an elementary level, do you know?
Schools, what?
cost of the school supplies to
Do
the
something
elementary.
to do that.
Give me a couple seconds.
Well,
Just, yeah, not exact, just curious, like,
like school supplies.
Yeah, it won't be.
Well,
That's not-
that's not gonna help us? You had rated 35.
Oh, yeah, the back to school supplies? Yeah, the back to school supplies is about 63,000.
is it really?
What does it say?
62,160.
Is that per school?
Yeah, 35 per K to 5, $35 1 to 5,
Per
$60 for kindergarten per student.
For every
Six-
student.
Oh, per student.
60 for kindergarten,
Yeah.
per student.
and then 35, 1 to 5?
And that's something, and that's,
Yes.
and that's,
I just
It-
wonder, that doesn't seem, $56,000 doesn't seem like a big number.
63,000.
63.
63, I'm sorry.
It's
Still not a
160.
big number in the great, big
That's-
scheme of things. And if there was any way that we could in the future support our teachers with
Yeah.
additional funds.
Well, when I said we need to, like.
well, that would be
we
the
feel
interesting, that would
that's-
be the interesting switch is, all right, we're gonna do what
Taxpayers
most
paying
districts
Oh,
stuff.
do.
I'm not suggesting that.
No, I know, but
Just saying,
we've
I'm
had
just-
this conversation, is, we had it at school committee, yesterday, it was, so we're pretty unique in providing those back-to-school supplies. If
Is
we,
is that for every child, or is that only for children that meet certain?
no,
needs
no,
or whatnot?
every,
That's everybody, okay,
Yeah,
so there's,
yeah.
it's need.
And what the principals have told, this came, we challenged our principals to give us any ideas on cost savings, no matter how bad of an idea it is.
Good.
And they actually did kind of push this, saying that, K to 5 students, so we provide the list, you go out and make your purchases, and they said, some of the principals said, they have in the back, in a closet, if there's a student that's in need,
There's some extra supplies.
they got the backpack full of supplies, and there's so many people and agencies
Yeah.
that do that,
Yeah.
that do, supply drives, backpacks, stuff the backpack. We've done it in our own district for other districts.
so for computers or any of the other technology things that are more expensive?
Well, that's another thing. So remember, we've invested, since the new high school project, we provide a one-to-one environment for our kids in every school. And starting in middle school, they take that Chromebook home. So, those are some things that we're trying to,
Yeah, and so we've,
that's a cost.
that's one of the items right here as one of our operational increases is technology.
Cost of the district.
Because we were able to fund a lot of that one-to-one with the new high school at the high school level. Then we moved into COVID and ESSER funding, which we spent on one-time purchases,
What we say, about 300,000 a year, is it for?
roughly, yeah.
Yeah, about
So
300,000 a year to-
But we funded through capital, through COVID grant funding, but now we're trying to start that process. In the end, what we wanna do is be able to give, K and 1, they use iPads in the classrooms. 2 to 5, and this is also kind of a student responsibility, personal responsibility thing, is you use that Chromebook from grade 2 to grade 5. 4 years with a student is pretty much the useful life for a Chromebook. Anybody knows.
Surprised that he didn't last that long.
Yeah. Well,
Wait till you get
believe
to
me,
middle school.
we have one person
Stop
repairing
bouncing
Chromebooks. That's
Yeah.
one of those 4 IT guys is constantly repairing Chromebooks. And then they get another one in 6th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Those go home, so that's even worse. And it's a middle school. Anybody who's at a middle schooler knows they really. And then there's another one in 9th grade, 9, 10, 11, and that's your Chromebook for your 4 years of high school.
But it's an important learning tool. It's the way we adults are working now and it's also, they're tested on Chromes too.
It's not the Apple IIes that we used to load up with.
No. Yeah.
But that
But
that
they're
means
good devices.
but that per grade level, that means if we're down to 275, say 300 per grade, just to make it even. I know it's a little bit lower than that now, but 300, 300, 300, that's 900 Chromebooks a year. 900 times 300, 270,000. That's that funding
It's
mechanism.
a reoccurring cost.
Yeah, and that we're building that model, to make that work. But that's why it's the technology is on here. So
The $1 million question, where does the school stand right now with its discussion with the town in terms of, my understanding is that there's a gap at the moment that we're trying to work through. Are we?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with them and we met today to
Yeah.
try to figure out ways we can try to help our predicament. We for our level funding is about 4.76%.
That's what the school's asking for, is 4.76%.
Well, we were asking for more than that because we had some.
our initial budget was 5.37%, but that included that 350,000 we talked about earlier.
5.37?
5.37, but that included the 350.
That included the positions that we talked about.
Floating nurse, the assistant.
And we had,
But if you take away that 350, it's 4.76%.
that's to roll over our existing budget.
That's level.
Level.
So on that front, the 3% was out there initially. We've had good discussions with Meg, Sean, and Mike about other items. So there's Ms. Costello knows about Medicaid.
Yes.
So we have a pretty extensive process where we bill Medicaid for a lot of the services we do, a lot of those therapists, and we receive funding, and it's gone up over the year. Actually, it was up, it went down, and it's starting to peak back up again. But that money goes directly to the general fund. But it's directly related to services we provide, and there's a lot of work involved. Sherry can definitely talk about that. But so we talked about moving those funds received into free cash to help offset.
And some
And I
one-time
got that-
costs.
I got that number
What, I was gonna say, do you
here
know what
somewhere.
that number is?
And then there's also another big thing over just the last few years is homeless transportation. I mean, you don't think the definition of homeless is a little bit different. It's anybody who's kind of doubled up. But if a student is
What does that mean, doubled up?
It means that
they move back to their parents' house.
Yeah, they move, so
Yeah.
we have, I don't wanna misquote this, but I think we have about 80,
It's all 100
Yeah.
100,
defined as homeless.
100
Yeah.
in this district.
But that's in this district. But
Yeah.
this
I'm
the
sorry,
home-
can you finish that thought? What is the 100?
We have 100 students that are under the McKinney-Vento Act. We get
Meaning that they're considered homeless by
they're
the,
defined,
Defined as
they fit the
Defined.
definition under that act as homeless.
It's very I mean, it's very rare in a town of Marshfield where someone doesn't have anywhere to go. But it does
Yep.
does happen
Yep.
on occasion. But primarily, those 100 students the parent may live with their
Parents.
parents. It's a parent living with
Or a
parents.
friend.
That's a lot of it.
about
Um,
3% of our student population. 3% of our student population that fits
Yeah.
that.
That's what it
Yeah.
is. And
Defined
it's-
that way.
Yep.
Isn't it
But-
defined as anybody that doesn't have their own roof over their head,
Correct,
right?
yeah.
So it could be somebody living like.
And we have a shelter in
Even
town.
if divorced, like if a parent is living in, you know,
Shelter.
shelter, you know, there are couch surfers, there's all,
That's right.
Yeah,
so it's literally, there's like an umbrella, and all
Yeah.
those kids fit into that umbrella.
but the
And a
homeless,
surprising number, actually, for me, that thinking that we had that many.
the homeless transportation piece of this, and it's grown rapidly, is if a student is living in Marshfield for any period of time, now on the opposite end, if they are living in Marshfield and have to move, just
It's where they start. the
Take it.
Wareham, to
Wh-
Wareham.
So wherever the
Where-
student
yeah.
starts the year is where the student is characterized, the homeless student, that's where the money comes from.
yeah, it's very, it's very, it's very
Isn't that their
generous
homeschool,
in the
what they would
definition.
call their homeschool, if I'm not right?
Yeah, they're entitled to go to either school, like, they're entitled to go to the school that they were
In
initially
Wareham.
at, so, you know, I know one, not to be too specific, but family house fire in Marshfield. Family has to leave, goes and lives with family members in another town. We're responsible for transporting those children to Marshfield.
That
back and
type of
forth.
thing, anything like that.
And you know, that's like a $200,000 something expense. Now the state has begun to recognize that, and they've begun they've always reimbursed, you know, a tiny bit. It's increased, and I don't have the numbers here, so I'd back it up. I don't know, but I can actually.
You do.
The idea is
If homeless transportation, right here.
Yeah, no, but it's not.
Oh,
no,
it's
that's-
FY
that's-
24,
that's-
yeah.
that's-
they want
Um,
kids to
sorry,
go to their homes
I
because
don't
they
have
go
it right in front of me.
school where they-
But then, that homeless transportation reimbursement, like, different than special education reimbursement, which comes directly to us, homeless transportation reimbursement goes to the general fund. So, you know, talking with the town finance, they agreed to take that free cash number from the previous year that went in there and help us out in this scenario. And then there's also been some, in our budget, there is that technology we talked about, the Chromebooks. You know, we have been looking at a leasing formula, but if the one-time costs in our budget, there's some, mainly technology, utilizing free cash for FY '26 to offset some of those costs that are already in our budget. Now, it won't appear in our budget, but it'll appear in a separate line item that we'll utilize. So, in talking with the town just today, that did move up our percentage to 4.09%. So that leaves us just about $384,000 short now. So we're in a lot better place than we were earlier today, which is appreciated.
And really working with us to try to figure out how we can.
So we're getting there.
Appreciate the work that everybody's putting into it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You know, we're getting late into the evening. Any other questions? I want to tell you, first of all, thank you for coming out, and thank you for spending almost 3 hours with us. I felt like I got a lot out of it. I hope
Oh,
everyone
absolutely.
feels the same way. This is almost $60 million of our budget, right?
Big,
So
yeah,
it's,
a lot of money.
it's, like I said earlier, I thought it deserves more than a 15-minute conversation. I want to tell you that I don't envy you in your job of having to try to do this balance. I understand that school districts across the Commonwealth and across the country, for that matter, are going through similar difficulties. I get the juggle. It's tough. It sounds like there's some tough decisions that are going to have to come up, just from a town perspective, a school perspective, and just terms of trying to figure out how to make sure that the present cost structure is sustainable in the long term. It definitely seems to me, at least, that I don't know if anybody disagrees, but it seems unsustainable at its current track. That we won't be able to play this game for much longer with the back and forth. Something's going to have to give somewhere, somehow, or whatnot.
It's difficult.
I appreciate everything that the teachers and the staff are doing as well. Some of these numbers are, I guess, I wouldn't say they're surprising, but they certainly remind us of how much work these folks actually put in to their jobs, into our community, and in the compensation, unfortunately. It's a whole nother conversation, but that's a tough one. It's a real tough one, especially knowing, again, we all have kids in the system, and knowing that these people are literally doing, God's work on a daily basis, putting in an incredible amount of hours, and they certainly, I think most of us agree, don't get as much as they deserve in total, and so I hope that there's more that we can do over time to be able to recognize their work and their contributions. In the special education piece too, I appreciate that you have a process and a methodology to make sure that we're bringing that inclusivity into our schools, that we're not just pushing people through a cycle, right? That we're actually trying to make sure that we're taking care of them. And I realize that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of money, frankly, but the fact that we're putting that kind of care in and putting a premium on that, I think is critical, and it speaks a lot to us as a town. So again, I just want to say that I really appreciate that. One thing that I have gotten from this conversation is that you're just as invested in the outcome as you are in the expense that goes into it, and I can't say enough how much that means. So,
No, thank you.
so I appreciate that.
Appreciate your investment as well, and the town's investment.
I don't have any other questions. Any other comments?
Hearing what you said, passionate is great to hear. I was just surprised at some of the numbers as far as English language, 20% disability,
A lot of change.
and a lot of
Seems like-
change.
and-
I was
That's
here
why-
7 years ago, and it's changed radically in 7.
That's why I say just the budget matching up with what the reality is. Something seems to be very off, and again, it's just my perception. And that I don't know. We have some decisions ahead of us. Maybe not in the next month or two, but definitely coming up for sure.
Well, we appreciate your advice and help too, and thoughts.
We'd like to be very active participants
Thank you. Yep.
in helping you try to figure out those, because we're not going to figure out with one or
We
two
welcome
people.
those thoughts and ideas.
Good.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we didn't throw out any crazy ideas that were,
No, hopefully.
or at
we
least
give
no
you-
crazier than you've heard before.
There's a lot, and hopefully.
We've been talking a lot of crazy ideas lately, so we're used to it.
Creativity is the way to go.
Yeah.
No, you got to be creative. All right. Well, with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
Second it?
All right.
Do you want me to?
I'll motion to adjourn. We have a second.
Second.
All right. All in
Okay.
favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye. All right. Very good.